Hello and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejohn Sarwick. Sejohn.
Devon's got jokes. Devon's got jokes today.
Devon does not have jokes today.
No.
I was trying to do the opening like Gilbert Godfrey, and I can't do it. I wanted to honor him with the sincerest form of flattery, which is imitation, according to, I think Mark Twain said that. Is that who said it?
I don't know.
It's credited to Mark Twain a bunch of times. It was probably Michael Scott or Wayne Gretzky. Or Shakes the Clown.
Yes, Billy Shakes the Clown.
Billy Shakes. I would watch the shit out of that movie. And so yesterday when I heard, that was my coping. Because right now, hi, welcome to the Say Report. We're a show about everything. And we are, just to get ahead of everything, this is our Spider-Man episode, but it's also a regular episode of the Say Report. We're not just focusing on Spider-Man No Way Home, especially because I received some blackmail-y extortion type messages from listeners, which I want to call them out. I feel like you don't send something like that to not get called out. And if you didn't want to get called out and it embarrasses you, that's just wicked Canadian. And I can't do anything about that. So this episode is going to be more than just Spider-Man No Way Home. And, you know, Gilbert Godfrey, he is an iconic voice from our childhood and in the world of comedy. And on a show that has honored Norm Macdonald and Louis Anderson, it'd be weird not to talk about Gilbert Godfrey briefly. Yeah. And there was a time where Gilbert Godfrey, Affleck realized that he had a life before being the voice of the Duck for Affleck. And they decided we don't want to work with Gilbert Godfrey anymore. And they were looking for a replacement. So at that time, that was when I began cultivating my Gilbert Godfrey impersonation. And I was really able to slip into it last night, like as I heard, and it's sort of how I coped with hearing about it. And I have not been able to like do it on command or do it since. And that's the Aristocrats. That's pretty much it. I don't.
Is he the only actor to appear in all three Problem Child movies, or does he not appear in Problem Child?
Oh, he's in the third one.
Did he come back for the third one? Well, I know he's in the third one.
The second one, he's the main protagonist again.
Is he? Yeah.
Yeah, he's in all of them. He's in all the Problem Child. The fact that he is in 3, that's really dedication. Let's just be honest about it. Gilbert Godfrey showing up in Problem Child 3, which arguably is my favorite Problem Child movie.
Okay. Relax.
What? No, I feel like I've had this discussion before, and I feel like I've had it with you, but I'm not 100% sure whether or not this happened on the Say Report, or if it was on one of the many other times we've been together with microphones in front of us.
You have to forgive me. I've been listening to a bunch of movie snobs to ride the highs and lows of David Lynch and the Cannes news this week. So when you start talking about how your preferred Problem Child is Problem Child 3, it's either a bit or I'm not buying it.
Hi, this is Devon Decker. This is happening in real time. This is the truth. This is not adulterated. This is not exaggerated for comedy or for drama. Problem Child 3 is my favorite Problem Child movie.
The problem that I have with Problem Child 3 is it feels like it's just more of Problem Child 2, like leftover.
Well,
bits.
That's what Problem Child 2 feels like. It feels like more of Problem Child, but with a plucky female XB.
You're kind of getting to the
Did you ever watch the Problem Child cartoon on USA? Because guess what? That was also just more Problem Child.
Gotta get into that deep lore to truly understand.
Oh, man, he has a friend and he has a dog, and that show's so good. I'm so mad. Remember what they took from you? They erased everything but Duckman from the adult original programming that USA was producing. And not the adult original programming. Actually, ironic to mention it, because Gilbert Godfrey, one of the big things that he was for me was those Saturday night movies. Tonight we're watching Attending Trauma High School. And I would, because this big thing happened, it has to have been 93, maybe it was 94. 94, I don't know, what was that? It was when Weird Science premiered, the TV show, the Weird Science TV show that introduced the world to Vanessa Angel, who would then go on to be in Kingpin. not that Kingpin, even though we're talking about Spider-Man. And that show, so it was Weird Science, and then it was followed by Duckman. And every Saturday night, I would, because my parents were younger, so they would have like people over. I would get to sit in their bedroom where the other TV was, and I would watch Weird Science and Duckman because I was completely like just unsupervised as a 9-year-old watching these shows that I probably shouldn't have been watching. That actually, as I say it here on the Say Report, feels like it explains a lot about my personality and my character. And that would be followed up by the Saturday Night Movie. And it would be Gilbert Godfrey doing like Elvira introducing these schlocky B movies.
Yeah.
That I would watch until my parents came in and they're like, you shouldn't be watching this. Like, I would see just enough to give me nightmares. Like, let's just be honest about it. So that was Saturday night, but Friday nights, they would also do on USA, and yeah, I was in the same bedroom on Friday nights as my parents had their Eyes Wide Shut parties. I assume it was a long time ago, and very soon afterwards, my mother became pregnant with my sister. So I have to imagine that they were Eyes Wide Shut parties that I was not privy to, right? I could imagine.
I'm not going down this route. I'm not going down this route with you.
Good, I'm glad.
Just because you had a lot of fish bowls in your house doesn't mean much to me, all right?
I was always finding keys. But on Friday nights, what USA would do, and at like a more regular time, because Weird Science was very much 10 to 11. It was Weird Science and Duckman. And it was at 8 o'clock that they would do Itsy Bitsy Spider, which, do you remember the animated series Itsy Bitsy Spider?
You are so out of my realm of television watching, man. Like at this point, like I Saturdays for me was
this
like
was Friday
UPN,
night. This is Friday night, but yeah.
Yeah, well, the Friday nights we were usually out doing stuff, whether it was like high school football games and stuff like that. So like, yeah, man, you're so far out of my watching.
I don't know where the high school was in Templeton, Massachusetts, which is where I lived at the time. So
TGIF is also the big thing on Friday for us in our house. Like we were doing like Family Matter and Boy Meets World.
Yeah,
and stuff.
so it really much these cartoons kind of felt like USA's way to capture the TGIF audience during the summer. Like it specifically wasn't something that was happening to compete against TGIF, but it was offering you somewhere else to go for new entertainment on Friday nights. And what it would be, it was, oh my God, there was also a Highlander animated series that was also part of this block.
See, I caught all of this stuff when it went into syndication on things like Comedy Central and Sci-Fi.
Yeah,
like that was when I was watching these various shows. So it's not like I didn't watch Weird Science. I just watched Weird Science 5 years later.
Weird Science was on Sci-Fi. That was crazy. Yeah. And that's when they did the last season, which was also strange. But yeah, so it was Itsy Bitsy Spider, Problem Child, and then it was animated Highlander, like 2 episodes of animated Highlander, and I didn't like that show. I wasn't into that show, which is crazy considering Highlander 3 Endgame is my favorite Highlander movie. Maybe I just like the third movies. But
Jet Li's the one is mine, but yeah.
Jet Li's the one is the best adaptation of a Highlander film. Let's not mince words. So Itsy Bitsy Spider followed a spider, like he was a for real spider. He was semi-anthropomorphized, but not like in like crazy, like he didn't have huge tits or anything like that. He was just kind of a spider that walked on 2 legs and then also had 4 arms on his torso. And he had a fuzzy purple head and 4 eyes. He didn't have a full 8 eyes. He had 4 eyes, and they were yellow, and they had the black pupils, so they weren't like the segmented kind of crazy eyes.
What was the animation house on this? Like, give me an idea of what
I could not.
Like,
Sejohn, I was like 8 years old.
Like, if you had to take a guess, like Duckman was.
I would say Deke,
right?
And Deke does not have it, but it felt more in the style of the type of stuff that you would see from Deke. Whoever was doing the Wish Kid. Remember that, the Macaulay Culkin? It was that same style of animation.
But like Deke, they were the guys that did Mighty Max and stuff, right?
Mighty Max is a little darker because that came after Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah.
This was still like very much a kid show. So like the closest XB in my head to this style of animation, and you need to understand that I am plumbing back like 20 years, almost 30 years into my life to remember these moments. It really, like, it reminds me of Wish Kid. So it was one of the 6 houses that Deke outsourced all their material to.
Wow.
Just to be that guy. So that Itsy Bitsy Spider, and he would just get into adventures, and like it was just based on the song to Itsy Bitsy Spider. Like the opening theme song was the Itsy Bitsy Spider went up the water spout, and then it like turned into like heavy rock as, you know, he got to the top, and then he rocked out and he played a little guitar. He was kind of like Mr. Bogus, but a spider.
Okay, I'm looking at it now, man. So, did you know that it was based on a movie of some kind, like a short? And in that short, you had guys like fucking like Jim Carrey, which Frank Welker apparently played the Spider, which of
That
course
checks
was the
out,
90s. Yeah. But yeah, man, this is pretty nuts.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that show aired with Problem Child, and Problem Child was the reason I was there, because I hope surprising nobody, I was a bit of a troublemaker as a youth.
This is very Life with Louis Eek the cat. Okay, I can see where we're going with this. All right.
So I saw Problem Child, and what I really liked about Problem Child is that Junior is a little shit. Like, he's a fucking asshole, but he's really only a fucking asshole when he is wronged. Like, he's willing to be the nicest person in the world, but if you cross him, he's gonna freaking crush you with a meteorite.
He is vengeance.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
And
that's the whole bit, right? Is like everybody thinks he's a great kid because he is generally a great kid. It's just once somebody starts giving him crap, he gives crap back twice over, right? Is like the whole shtick of the character.
So yeah, Problem Child is definitely where Devon Decker came from, because oh my god, I just think of all these times where like I expected
They put one of ours in the hospital, we put one in the morgue.
I expected respect from like my teachers or other authority figures, and when I didn't get it back, that was when you were done. Like, Devon Decker don't give a shit about what the punishment is, because you are going to treat me with the respect that I feel I deserve, which is a little insane. But then I think about my 10th grade teacher, who I hear the stories about people like their bullies in high school and stuff. My 10th grade geometry teacher was my bully, and I've definitely talked about that on this show. But really, it was one of those other things where if you piss me off, you put me in the hospital, I'm gonna put you into morgue, right? From the hospital. I didn't have a group. I apologize.
You sent me down a fucking rabbit hole with this, man, because like I have found myself now looking at a promo from USA for Itsy Bitsy Spider and Problem Child Hour.
Yeah, and it was on Friday nights, and it was it was the train. It was like USA Train or Power Train.
Wow.
Train, man. USA Express is what it was called, and they used a lot of train stuff as the visuals. But yeah, so Problem Child 3, I don't know, because Gilbert Godfrey passed away. Rest in power, Gilbert Godfrey. Problem Child 3 is my favorite movie in that series, because unlike the other Problem Childs, where Junior just trying to live his life and somebody fucks with him and then he gets his fucking revenge for being fucked with, Problem Child 3 adds this super fucking video game story where Junior has a crush on this girl, but there are 3 other suitors who wish to garner her affection. Mm-hmm. And one of them is a jock, one of them is a Boy Scout, and one of them is like an actor. And Junior's decides that the best way to get this girl to be with him is to eliminate the other suitors.
Yep.
So I'm sure you know, I love this movie though. So what Junior does is he joins these activities, but he finds a way to join the activities where like his dad is all like excited. Like the kid's a hyper manipulator. He's an evil fucking genius. Junior is a evil fucking genius. And so he's like, oh, I don't know, Dad. I think maybe the Boy Scouts could really give me the like backbone and determination and moral guidelines that I need to be a good kid. It's not
still John Ritter at this point, though, right?
I don't believe it's John Ritter. I honestly feel like it's Dallas Roberts, who is kind of bargain basement John Ritter, but it can't be. I have not seen Problem Child 3 since it aired on Wonderful World of Disney in 1997.
I was going to ask if it was somebody like Steven Weber. Like, this feels, or Tim Daly. Like, it feels like it would have been right in their wheelhouse.
I don't know. I don't know who it is. If you want to look up who plays his father, they kind of, what the weird thing is, so Junior is adopted. That's a big part of the Problem Child mythos, is that he's sort of like Damien, but it's like, what if Damien were a real kid? Like,
yeah, I mean,
like
I was going to say that, like, the bit of the first movie, actually the first two movies, is like, you are pretty convinced this kid is the devil.
Yeah.
Like, so as much as, like, we have been talking about how, like, oh, he tries to be nice, but then it doesn't, like, but he kind of goes out of his way sometimes to kind of put people in positions to not be able to be nice. And then he uses that as an excuse to be mean. It's very, very, very devilish, very manipulative.
Yeah, it's sort of like comedy satire of The Omen. It really is. It's interesting stuff. So I don't know who the father. If you want to look up Problem Child 3, good luck finding.
William Catt.
Who is it?
William Catt.
Okay.
Don't know that name.
Don't know who that is.
Yep.
All right, so yep. William Catt. So they kind of like get away from the whole adoption thing because William Catt kind of looks like Junior. Like there's a family resemblance there that's a little strange. But yeah, so he's like, if I join the Boy Scouts, then I can do all this. So then he gets the Boy Scouts, and it turns out that, like, all of his, like, psychotic tendencies actually kind of work.
Oh, greatest American hero, William Catt. Now I remember.
He's the freaking guy.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah. Fucking.
I believe it.
Dude from House, man. Yeah.
I didn't watch House. I've watched 2 episodes of House in my entire life.
Not House the TV show. House the movie.
Oh, okay. There's a movie called House.
Oh my God, famously. And then House 2 is okay. We're not doing this today.
Are we talking about House Party?
Okay, Zach and I might need to start that horror movie podcast stat. Keep going. Do your thing.
So yeah, so he does it. So it turns out that all of his more psychotic tendencies, like loving knives and starting fires, makes him a model Boy Scout because out in the woods, those are the things. So then he starts to make this kid look bad, the like golden Boy Scout look bad. So then he tries to hurt Junior, and Junior, in defending himself, gets the upper hand and defeats him. So then he's out of the way, and that's when this girl like moves on to the actor, and it's going to be Peter Pan that they're doing, and the kid's playing Peter Pan.
I'm pretty sure this is just the plot of You. I'm not like, right? Like, am I?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, that's another one that I know of. I haven't ever seen.
But he keeps taking out suitors that are in the way in order to be with this person to the point where.
He doesn't kill him, though. He just...
It's also a little bit of Hannibal. I'm not going to lie. This is starting to sound like this movie is about a psychopath.
Well, yeah, so he's a tree in Peter Pan, and then what he ends up doing is while the kid is flying, he drops him, and the kid's like a shit to him. Like, the kid does it to deserve it. Like, he treats Junior poorly.
Right. Yeah. No,
so he's getting his revenge. So, no, he drops him, and the kid actually... either the kid or the drama, like the director, bites off the tip of their tongue. Oh, the kid falls and he breaks his leg, and he lands on the drama teacher, who was also mean to Junior, and she bites off the tip of her tongue. So then she can't talk the rest of the movie.
And this is supposed to be a family good time film.
This is a movie that aired on ABC primetime Sunday night under the banner of Wonderful World of Disney. And then the third one, so after that, he has to go deal with the hockey kid. And, and oh my God, think about it, Sejohn. I was in Boy Scouts until I beat up that kid who tried to fight me at Yagoo. And then they're like, you're out of Boy Scouts. And then I played hockey until I broke my ankle. And then also I have a degree in theater. Holy shit, I'm Problem Child 3.
Dev. Oh, man. There's so much we're discovering tonight that we might not want to put to tape. I'm going to be honest about that. You are recording, right?
Like, yeah, well, this is all... No, I didn't waste these 20...
I want there to be evidence that I was not privy to any of this information before today.
That kid put hands on me and threw a punch, and I just... one punch and I laid him out. There was a time where I had one punch that could lay people out. And I don't, that's not incriminating, right?
But that was long ago.
That was long ago. Oh, man, this is not the Adam Sandler podcast. It's just Wednesday, so we're bringing that Wednesday energy. I'm also full of, like, insane thoughts. So the most important thing about this is, first of all, rest, Gilbert Godfrey. Thank you for the comedy. Thank you for the memories. Thank you for being in a series of movies that were successful enough to maybe give me the blueprint for me in later life. I don't know. I'm a little afraid, actually.
Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you for the conversation. But the most important thing, the whole point of this, is that we are recording this episode on Wednesday, April 13th. Is that the date today? Yeah. So it's Wednesday, April 13th. And the reason for that is that Easter is on the day when we usually record, and a bunch of Easter stuff is going on. So we probably could have done it then, but, you know, we wanted to do it. But it's not a time capsule episode because we're just going to try to do a regular episode. And the whole reason for this preamble is the fact that if something happens on April 14th through April 17th, and we're not going to be talking about it because as much as we pretend to know the future, we don't actually know the future. And so we're just trying to protect our asses in case something huge happened.
Yeah, you know, nothing like a good 20-minute lead up to actually doing the show. Let's do it, everybody.
I got distracted by Gilbert Godfrey and my personal connection to him via the Problem Child series. And you said
I gotta thank you, because what you've done is you've really taken my mind off of the horror movie that I watched this afternoon before we came to record our funny show. So I appreciate that.
What horror movie did you watch, Sejohn?
So it's this little known film, at least to me, was starring one Christopher Reeves called Somewhere in Time. And it is the scariest movie.
That movie's fucking terrifying.
That movie is the scariest movie I've ever seen, right? So, like, I sit down and to be fair, I'm only catching the last 40 minutes of this movie. I just want to make sure that I am clear here. So, as far as I know, there's only 3 people in this movie, and it is Christopher Reeves, Tessa Burke, is that the actress's name, and then Christopher Plummer. As far as I know, there's nobody else in this movie. They are all at a hotel in upstate Michigan, and as far as I can tell, they're wearing old clothes for no reason, and I am then told, oh yeah, well, he's from the future. What? That's the first thing that I am told about this movie, is Christopher Reeves has come back from the future to be with this woman, and because he saw a picture of her, fell in love, and he thought that he had the right to travel through time to demand her affection because of that.
Yep.
And so
there's an American Dad episode called Fart Break Hotel where Roger eats kimchi and farts a methane gas that displaces them from the house. And when they arrive at the hotel, where just because he's really a concierge in real life, Hector Elizante is there. Not Hector Elizante, Hector Elizondo. Mr. Elizante was his character name in Last Man Standing. Not to confuse me any further. Thanks a lot, Gary Marshall. Also, rest in peace, Gary Marshall. And Steve sees a picture of a woman, and Hector Elizondo, voiced by Hector Elizondo, teaches Steve how to time travel very similarly to Somewhere in Time, so that Steve can be with that woman from the painting.
Yeah.
And also, just spoilers for that American Dad, in case you're not going to rush out and watch it, it turns out that Steve is the woman in the painting.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. So I mean, like, long story short, Christopher Reeves plays a playwright in the 1970s, I want to say, that falls in love with a picture of a woman from back in like the 1910s. And so he figures out that there's a way that he can put himself to sleep and wake up in the 1910s. So he has to just surround himself with objects of the time and only think about the time as he falls asleep. Literally, that's how he time travels. And that's important because after...
How do you time travel back, Sejohn?
Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But after traveling back in time, demanding this woman's affection for 3 days, somehow winning it, despite the fact that she spends her entire time, from what I can tell in the movie, telling him to get the fuck away from her. Because why wouldn't she?
Who would choose Christopher Reeves over Christopher Plummer?
It's not even a matter of that. It's just a matter of when this homeless bum shows up and says, I've loved you my whole life, and you were destined to love me too. That's not a pickup line. That's creepy. And
You'd think a writer would come up with something better.
Unfortunately, Christopher Reeves doesn't realize that he has in his pocket a penny from 1972, and this sets off his return back, to which he awakens on the floor of his hotel room in the 1970s, cries his eyes out because the only woman he's ever loved is now gone, proceeds to then die of a broken heart, end of movie, as him and this woman float off into heaven together. That is this movie. And I sat there the entire time fucking horrified. Last 40 minutes, I guess, to be fair, just be fucking terrified. Just like, first of all, the way he was behaving with this woman and the ways in which he was demanding her love, the fact that she just kind of went for it, then him fucking waking himself up by accident and dying of a broken heart. Every part of it was like watching the scariest Twilight Zone episode that had never got made. It was
the scariest episode of the Twilight Zone because Rod Serling wasn't there to say an interesting tale.
Yeah, right. To like bring it all back with like some morality play. But like there's this moment where Christopher Reeves is just like looking out a window and crying his eyes out, like almost like straight out of like fucking Bella from Twilight, and it is horrifying to watch because on the one hand, he is clearly feeling this deep emotion, and it's some of the best acting I've ever seen Christopher Reeves ever do. But on the other hand, I still can't wrap my head around the fact that he barely knew this woman, figured out time travel for her, then just whiffed it with her, and then fucking woke himself up by accident. And I'm just like, there's so much baggage behind this one shot and this one image, and none of it's good. And this is insane. And then add to that the fact he looks like he's in a fucking Michael Myers mask or something. It's crazy. And I mean, like killer Michael Myers, not like
oh, behave.
Yeah, man, it's just it was fucking crazy. And I watched this like an hour before we then had to sit down and record this, and I'm just like, I'm supposed to be talking about Spider-Man tonight, and I can't get this movie out of my head.
What I watched, I specifically was like Wednesday, New Moon Night. Usually we watch New Moon Night, but I'm like, we're not going to watch Moon Knight because I don't want to be distracted by anything. So I watched an episode of Mr. Mayor with the family for the first time that I've watched 3 times since it aired last night at 8:30.
Excellent.
And a Young Rock that was just awesome. Because Young Rock is getting to like the early days of when he was wrestling. So it's stuff that like if you knew Dwayne Johnson in the early days of the WWF, there's so much payoff. Nice. Like it's such an enjoyable, especially like, and also Rocky Johnson, his father, and the stuff that he was doing in Hawaii and in Nashville, which are what's happening with the 8-year-old Rock and the 15-year-old Rock. Okay. So it's all stuff that like, if you were kind of a wrestling nerd, which I was up until, I don't know when I kind of stopped following it. I guess when I could go to the movies on my own, right? Mm-hmm. Like when I wasn't stuck at home Friday nights watching Itsy Bitsy Spider, Problem Child, and wrestling. It's when you know what it is? It's when we didn't have a black box anymore, so I had to pay for Royal Rumble, and it was not worth it.
Yeah, the paid event thing was always, I don't know. The paid event stuff was always really weird in my friend group because none of us were in a position to be paying for that sort of stuff. Like we didn't have anybody in the group that was paying for pay-per-view events, so it always became this thing where like one person would have had access to it and then had to like explain it to the rest of us, which was already how I was getting half of my wrestling anyway, because I wasn't watching it religiously.
Yeah.
And so I kind of fell off the train once I stopped hanging around certain people that were able to do the paid event stuff. So much like you, once I didn't have access to the paid events, it wasn't worth keeping up anymore.
Yeah. I think the whole suck it thing, like that was so big when I was in 6th grade, and I'm just like, man, wrestling has changed.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of got crass, and it was disappointing. Like we actually just,
I mean, there used to be a main wrestler called the Iron Sheik. I used to get like it was always crass, man. Like let's not act like they were somehow gentlemen in the 80s and early 90s.
True. It was a different type of crass though. It wasn't blue. Does that work? Did I use blue correctly?
No, you didn't, because they were also extremely blue in the 80s and 90s. Like I don't know what to tell you.
I don't know. I guess Undertaker was like my favorite guy, and when his whole fucking story is insane.
Well, yeah, I don't. I mean, like, I don't disagree. They got to a point where like the comedy got mean, and right, and like it had always been kind of mean, but it was this weird thing where like it was just mean to just everybody. Like it was mean to the audience, it was mean to each other, it was mean to themselves. Like nobody was like having fun anymore, and like that was the bit, was that everybody was just so fucking serious. There wasn't a single person that felt like they were like enjoying themselves while you were watching it.
Yeah. So that sort of thing happens.
And then the Miz came around. Sorry, no, we're not turning this into a wrestling.
We're not turning this into a wrestling podcast. There are plenty out there. But yeah. So I move away from wrestling, but like I still know this stuff. So watching the show, it's getting to like he just got the call from Pat Patterson about they want you to wrestle in Corpus Christi, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is gonna be such an exciting thing. I'm gonna have to watch an 8 and 15-year-old Dwayne Johnson story first because that's how the show is structured. But in 3 episodes, I'm going to get a real good payoff for stuff that I was aware of, and I'm excited about it. Yeah, so that's what I did in order to do it. You watched Somewhere in Time, which I don't remember which member of my extended family it was, but one of them, that was their favorite movie.
That's always the story about Somewhere in Time too. I guarantee anybody out there, even if you've never heard of this movie and this is the first time that you're hearing about it, first of all, you're welcome. but the other thing is,
we're sorry.
Mention this to your older relatives. One of them will either say, "Oh, I love that movie," or "Oh, your father loved that movie." Like it is one of those movies that usually catches one or two people that like those kinds of movies don't usually catch. Like that's the story around it. Is like, oh yeah, your grandfather was never one for romances, but Somewhere in Time was just something special about that. Or like, oh yeah, your mother didn't really like Christopher Reeves very much, except for Somewhere in Time. She really loved him in that. Like that for it is like this weird catch-all movie for like non-movie buffs, and like I love that. I think that's great, but like holy crap, I had never really experienced how fucking bizarre that movie really is.
It is Back to the Future for like the generation before ours.
Yeah.
Because it was their time travel movie.
And like the old woman gives him the watch and is like, "You have to find me." Then she dies that night, and then he goes back in time and finds her, and then never finds her again. So like she must. It's just you start thinking about time travel, and when people talk about how time travel movies just break their brain, this movie is like the first one.
Especially
that
because
really...
is he really traveling, or is he just like dreaming about it?
Exactly. Like, you're given kind of this weird impression at the end that maybe he's just kind of just been like in a fucking
lucid dreaming,
lucid dream for the last 8 days and not feeding himself, and that's why he's dying.
Yeah, he's dying from really malnutrition. It's a crazy movie, and like that's not a good thing to watch before the Say Report, Siege, and I gotta be honest with you.
Yeah, well,
that's the new rule. We don't have a lot of tenets or rules on the Say Report, but the new commandment of the Say Report is no Somewhere in Time before recording.
Fair enough.
Though, let's be honest, eventually I think we should do... A time capsule feels appropriate to do an episode where we just watch that whole movie and then just sit in front of our microphones, mouths agape for an hour.
Yeah, I think, honestly, the only thing I could probably do if we ever did anything with it is maybe do a commentary with you, because I don't think I could watch it alone ever again. Oh my god, don't make me watch it alone.
I'll do a commentary. I'd be all about it. Next time we're together in a place, I would be all about trying to resurrect the commentaries. It needs to be one where we're like sitting next to each other on the couch, though. We can't
hold hands.
So that eventually I can find the penny and leave, because Sejohn, I'm from the future. I need to tell you. You think it's bad now. That's not a funny joke anymore in 2022. All right, so I said that somebody blackmailed me into making this episode about more than just Spider-Man, and that somebody is Hab Guy. Wave to Hab Guy. And what he did was, 2 episodes ago, I shared the rules of Yellow House, and he totally strummed my ego with, like, I played Yellow House driving home from grocery shopping, and my wife had no idea what was going on as I laughed and laughed. And I felt a little bit of pride that I got Yellow House out there. And then after he like you know, polished up my ego and made me feel all good, he's like, I haven't seen the new Spider-Man movie, and I just got caught up with your episodes.
No.
So then I'm like, oh, well, have you seen the other Spider-Man movies? And he's like, the 2012 one. And I go, oh, yeah, there's a lot of movies you got to see before Spider-Man. So I wanted to give him a little bit of entertainment with this week's episode. And that's what this whole opening of the Say Report hopefully was. Is a little bit of entertainment before we just geek the fuck out on Spider-Man.
So Devon and I took our usual biopic narrowcasting that we do to just the two of us and spread it out to just one more person this week, just for you. Okay, the rest of the episode is just for us, though.
Oh, biopic narrowcasting is such a wonderful phrase. Thank you for that. No, I do have to talk about one other thing, because you said that we could explore some of my insanity that I was going through this morning.
I'm sorry. Was this not it? Okay.
Oh, no. All of this is new insanity that happened as soon as I sat down in this chair and, actually dealt with my feelings about the passing of Gilbert Godfrey.
Oh, man.
Let's
do it.
Because what is the Say Report but free therapy for Devon Decker and hopefully for Sejohn Sarowik.
Podcasting is therapy for white guys? I don't know, Jeff. That seems like a stretch.
What? So I'm a big fan of Delta Burke, and I invented something today that... that Sejohn...
Are you going to send yourself back in time?
I'm not going to send myself back in time. But if I am ever in a committed relationship, a committed monogamous relationship with somebody, and I happen to go back in time for one reason or another, I think it can't be the fact that I go back in time deliberately. Right? The rules of this, what I'm talking about before I go further without giving it a name, is a time travel hall pass. Mm-hmm. We're all familiar with the concept of the hall pass from the 2012 comedy starring Owen Wilson and Ed Helms. Is that who's in that movie?
Yeah, Ed Helms and I believe you are correct. Ed Helms and Owen
Wilson. It's a Farrelly Brothers movie, right? And Applebee's paid for most of it.
Well, isn't it a one Farrelly brother? Isn't it one of the ones?
I think it's one of the only ones. Yeah, I think it's just Peter who's on that one. I don't know. I've seen it one time and I was really surprised by.
It's Ed Helms and is it not Jason Sudeikis? Now
Jason Sudeikis is definitely in it. I thought a Wilson was in it too, though.
Let me double check it now that I'm saying it.
I know that Jenna Dewan is that.
It is Jason Sudeikis. It's Owen Wilson and Jason Sudeikis. Ed Helms is not.
There's
in
no Ed Helms in that movie.
We're thinking of the Vacation poster, which looks almost exactly the same as the Hall Pass poster. Also Stephen Merchant. But yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's both the Farrellys. It's
both of them, right?
Yeah, it's both of the Farrellys. I didn't realize.
I thought so. Yeah. I know that movie 43 and all that. It's the Farrelly brothers. Someday, as Rhode Islanders, we should probably do more than just Shallow Hal and Dumb and Dumber.
Man, did you remember that Soups was in it?
Yeah.
This is a hell of a cast. I gotta go back and watch this movie again. I saw this at the Dirt Theater, drunk off my ass, so I barely remember this movie.
You need to understand, listener of the Say Report, that I have never been more proud of myself as a person, because Sejohn has never referred to it as the Dirt Theater. He always tries to give it its proper name, but I've gotten in there. I'm in his head right now.
It's dead now. What am I saving?
That's true, but it's the Dirt Theater. It was always kind of fun because it reminded me of the Dirt Mall. It always felt like a Mallrats reference.
I think part of the problem is that it wasn't always the Dirt Theater, right? It was a Hoyt cinema when I was a little kid, yeah. So it was like an actual like gorgeous little cinema where I saw Pocahontas and Meet the Deedles and shit like that.
When you saw movies there, does that fountain actually work?
Yeah,
and it wasn't just gross black water.
Exactly, when that fountain actually ran and there were multiple ticket counters and yeah. That's how I remember that theater when I was really little. And then throughout its life, it became a cheaper theater, and then finally the Dirt Theater. So when I say I saw it at the Dirt Theater, I'm talking about it in terms of time. By the time Hall Pass came around, it was $1 for a ticket, and you would go in the afternoon when nobody else was there, and you'd rip the seat out in front of you so that you had a better view. Yeah, no, we did plenty of that. As adults too, but yeah, so Hall Pass, right? That movie, we all know what a Hall Pass is. It's basically cheat for free card. In historians, wait, but we got to get this right? It's not just a cheating thing. It's a hall pass to just like misbehave, like go and like do drugs, get drunk, like it's the idea that you get to kind of let loose in a way that you don't normally get to in your married life. So yes, a huge part of that seems to be the whole like single like cheating thing. Like that's maybe like I would say like maybe it's like an 80-20, like 80% of it is that, but 20%, but like
so the hall pass has evolved. The hall pass has evolved from when it was first introduced in the 2012 film, because the hall pass specifically in that movie, the way that is Jenna Dewan is not her name. She's just been in everything. She's playing Lucy Lane and the girlfriend on The Rookie right now. It's Jenna Fisher. Jenna Fisher is who I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
She's the wife in that, and her mother tells her about the concept of the hall pass. And in the film, hall pass, as a hall pass is described, is he gets to sleep with one person consequence free.
Okay.
And then the night before, with Seth Rogen, because it's Seth Rogen month at the Say Report, Anthony Mackie and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, that is when Seth Rogen's wife says, you have a hall pass for tonight, but what she means is you're about to be a father, and so tonight I want you to get all of your party boy tendencies out of your system.
Okay, maybe that's where I'm kind of getting.
Yeah, a conflagration there completely makes sense. But as the movie, the Farrelly Brothers film, introduced it, it is basically a guilt-free, consequence-free excuse from your spouse to go out and work out like any repressed sexual energies that you may have with another person. And it's supposed to be like a one-night stand, and it really stems from the fact that before, people didn't have sex before marriage, and now you live in this society that is sex, so it's triggering desires within you that you never had the chance to satiate before. And honestly, historians, if not confused by its usage in The Night Before, might one day look back at the hall pass as the early days of polyamory. I'm just going to be honest about it. It really feels like this thing where, like, it's a more evolved way of thinking. I don't know.
I'm not going to sit here and talk about this movie that I couldn't even fucking remember the point of.
They go to Applebee's. That's the point of it. The point is to get people to go to Applebee's again. Make Applebee's great again should have been the tagline for Hall Pass. Because when you're there, you're family. That's the Olive Garden. Something about neighbors. Anywho, so a hall pass, we know what that is. So a time travel hall pass, I believe is different. And it's also different too, because like it's a celebrity bang is also some of the vocabulary that I hear of it. It's like your free pass. Like if you got the chance, like if you're married to somebody and your wife is like, yeah, but if John Cena ever shows up and is like, hey, do you want a bone? I get to have sex with John Cena. And it's like, okay,
George Clooney.
So if you get to have sex with John Cena, I get to have sex with, let's use Jenna Dewan, right? Because she's in my head for some reason. And that's just sort of how it goes. So what I thought of today is the time travel hall pass, and it's not really that, it's more of like a celebrity bang here. And that is, if you accidentally find yourself in the past and find yourself with the opportunity to sleep with someone historic, so it could be like Einstein or Ben Franklin, or it could also be a significant celebrity from the time, you have free reign to take advantage and try to make that happen.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, like, I think like a young Lucille Ball, right? Like, right? Like in like your 20s, like knocking it out of the fucking park in comedy and really coming into her own and doing like all sorts of funny shit. And at the time in their 20s, she was kind of doing a lot of side work as like a background actress in Hollywood and things like that. And I bet you she was just a fucking blast to be around. See, like, so. Like, because you mentioned this, and the first thing I think of is just like, yeah, like obviously you want to like go for that person that just like, you know, rocks your socks, right? But there's also this element to me that like part of that is if I'm going back in time,
totally influenced by watching Somewhere in Time, even just on a subconscious level. I want it to mean something. It's
no,
what
it's not.
Feels
no,
like.
No. It's not even a mean something thing. It's I'm gonna have to like if I'm going back in time for this person, my thought is, and this is influenced influenced by Somewhere in Time. They're the person I'm going back for. I don't have anything else going on. So, like, they better be a fun person to also hang out with. This isn't just, like, somebody I'm going to just, like, meet up with, be with, and then run away to my knowledge, right? Like,
yeah, that's true. That's
right?
You know what? Sejohn hit the nail on the head, because my time travel hall pass which is what we're calling it. There might be better ones, but say vocab, time travel hall pass. My time travel hall pass would be Delta Burke. Delta Burke does something to me that, whoo, like, but
and
I don't
be really fucking fun at parties.
But
right?
I just don't. But I don't want to like pump and dump with Delta Burke. Like, I want to marry Delta Burke. I want to make her happy.
See?
I want to let her know that it's okay. Like, you're not putting on weight. You're beautiful.
This has always been the funniest fucking thing about these games for me. Like this is the shit that like little kids play when they're on like the fucking playground. Like kill, fuck, marry, and all that sort of shit, right? Yeah. And like that idea being that even as little kids, there was this idea that like, well, yeah, but this is the person that I want to actually spend time with, is like something that was even prevalent in our brains then. Yeah. And like it's I don't know, it's amazing to me how much we've been able to fuck each other up. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, like as a society.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing. And also, so that's just a thought process that I had that I wanted to share. And the last thing, and then I promise we will talk about Spider-Man. We will talk about Spider-Man unadulterated for probably an hour. And it's going to come after this. And this is sort of a teaser, right? Because we're recording this. We'd be recording this on Easter. It'd be releasing the day after Easter. I had a conversation with Will early this past weekend, like after we had recorded the last episode of the Save Report, where I realized the United States and our like religious tendencies is so backwaters compared to the rest of the world.
Welcome, Devon.
Like, I just, like, because he mentioned that he's been going to a lot of religious events. Like, he went to a christening, and he went to, like, a specific type of funeral and a specific type of wedding. And then he's like, this is my first time ever going to a christening. And that's, like, crazy to me to think that it's the first time he went to a christening. And then I realized it's because, oh, my God, America, we're so stuck in the past with all of our religious beliefs, and the fact that like we're allowing religion currently to influence policy on how our nation is run. We're like the backwater crazy people of the world.
I mean, let's be honest, like we left England because we wanted to be able to practice faith, right? Like that was like a specific
that was the goal. That was the MO.
So, like, to come here and then be like, we established a non-religious nation is insane. Now, arguing about what that religion is, we could do that to the end of our days, but we have to admit at some point that this is a nation founded on religion, just not a specific one and not the ways in which we want it to be. Because, like, I mean, you know, you had Jefferson ripping up his own fucking Bible, right? Like that. Like
yeah, it's weird. It's weird because it really is America. The United States of America specifically is founded on two tenets. It is founded on religion, and it is like freedom from tyranny, freedom from rule of some like royal class. And like it's those two things that come together, and like to that fact that like, well, the only way that we could beat up the Britons and get our independence was by making this backroom alliance with these people who are only in America to practice the faith that they care about. But all these other guys who like, I just want to be rich and own land. Like, that's the two things. So then when it comes times to make the rules of the game that is America, like, the first rule is a separation of church and state. The one does not influence the other. Can we at least agree to that? We both get to live here. We both get to live our lives the way that we want to, free from the rule of the English crown. But, oh my God, you guys stay in your side of the room, and we will stay on our side of the room.
I know there's a lot of people that are going to be like, no, we were founded on a freedom of religion and freedom to not practice religion and all that. And you're not wrong. But think about it this way. We were also founded on the belief that every man is created equal.
While in that same document, it gave designations for how unequal certain men were.
Just saying. For in the same way that we were founded as a religious free nation, we were founded as a man is equal nation, and boy, neither of those has worked out. So,
well, it wasn't just a religion. It wasn't just a religion free nation. Like that's more Rhode Island specifically, like the state of Rhode Island. Like he wanted to do whatever he did. There were people who left England to escape religious persecution of the Church of England, but they weren't like, I want to be an atheist. They're
That's
like,
exactly
I want to
my
be a
point.
Quaker.
Right.
I want to be a Puritan. And yeah, that's very...
So, but there's a lot of people out there that want to say that we were founded as a nation free from religion, and no, unfortunately, I wish. Like, don't get me
If
wrong.
we were a
like,
nation founded free from religion, the first rule of the instruction manual would not be a separation of church and state.
Yeah, that blunt acknowledgement by people of the time that even they had a problem. Like hey.
Like, we know the devil that we had to get into bed with in order to gain our independence. We need to make sure that we do not let them make any policy.
Imagine if Benjamin Franklin followed up all of his idioms with, like, pardon the pun.
I would love that. Especially in his little bifocals.
Or like,
and he fixes his glasses.
Am I right?
Am I right? Fixes glasses. Yeah. So that's everything. It was just a realization that, like, I guess I kind of always knew, but it just became crystal clear to me in this discussion with Will about all of these various religious things he's been attending. And like, oh yeah, religion's probably a novelty outside of America, isn't it?
Well, the wilder thing for me is that there's certain things that we do in this country that other countries will do, and we put a religious swing to it that doesn't necessarily need to be there, right? Like Christmas and Easter are perfect examples of this shit. Like, there are people that are non-practicing but still get together with their families for Easter and stuff like that, and like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to get together with my family for an Easter event and have it not turn into something religious. I cannot fathom that, right? And that is solely because of the ways in which I was brought up in a family that, let's be entirely honest, was not strictly religious in any way.
Yeah, I don't understand. There was a lot of religion was pushed on me a lot until I was about 10 years old. Like, I went through communion, and a lot of that was societal pressures from my mother's mother that he needs to go through communion. He needs to do all of this.
As is the way.
Yeah.
It's always somebody's parent that's always like, well, to make grandma happy, we're going to make sure he at least gets, communion. And
then they found a way to appeal to me that, like, you're doing all this and here's what's going to happen. You'll get like a party at the end of it. So, like, even then, like, my father, my father was never really religious. But then I also think, like, my parents tell me stories about, like, because my mother is one religion and my father is another, like, that was a huge deal. And, like, my grandmother didn't want them to get married.
Yeah.
Because of that. Like, as like, and that's just going back to, like, the 80s, like, the early 80s, that being, like, a real thing that happened in the nation that touches me.
I don't think I've ever been to a funeral that wasn't religious in some way. And I am a man that has been to too many funerals in his life. But I think every funeral I've ever attended has been a religious funeral in some way or another, which is, like, not par for the course in the rest of the world. Like, not every funeral has to be. And not every funeral part has to be, right? Like, the ways that, like, people can come and do the visitation and stuff like that. But no, not for me. It's always been associated with some funeral parlor that's, like, attached to a church that, like, they just can, like, factory line the body down the way. Like, shit.
No, actually, one of the things weird. that I enjoy is that the myriad of funerals that I have attended, usually as like as a support animal, like, for lack of a better term, I have gotten to see many different. Friend is the
term, just to let you know, there is a word.
There's a word for when you're a human. Yeah. No, and that's just the situation. I have really kind of reveled in the ways that life can be celebrated, and it sort of reflected on and influenced how I celebrate life. And actually, I know that living in Rhode Island, like, someone at where I work just passed away, and I had a conversation with someone. I'm like, you got to keep moving forward, right? Like, that's how I think of it, because I don't think that they would want us to start our lives just because theirs ended. And the people, like, they did not really like that, like, that I was not hyper, like, sad and like, I didn't really have a lot of interaction with this person, but like the fact of the matter is, and also we're in, like, the shadow of a pandemic where we just lost so many people. Like, the numbers are staggering if you actually think about them.
Yeah, we
that
are
like
two guys in our mid-30s. We've seen everything from from the Afghan War to hell, the Iraq War. Like we were alive during like the first Iraq War in the early
yeah,
90s, right?
Desert Storm, yeah,
Like shit, man. Like so we've seen a couple of things. I'm not saying that we like own the fucking bucket on sadness, but like we
no,
we
they saw some stuff before us too, Sejohn.
yeah, it's just like between that, a pandemic, like we've seen some shit, and like I don't know, maybe we've just gotten a little numb to it, but also this is just kind of the way that we
But like
process
it was,
this
and
stuff.
like, and I feel like if I was just like, you know, that shit happens, like that'd be like a numbness. But my like you just need to keep moving forward. Like I don't think they'd want us to stop because their journey stopped. And maybe our pace slows down a little bit because we're now thinking about what they are and making sure that we're noticing things. But that constant moving forward, I think that's an important way to also remember the life of somebody. And that's my own personal thing from all of the various things that I have had to deal with in my life.
Man, all right.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of processing and moving forward, we should talk about a little. We should talk about a little film that came out.
Yeah,
last
we
year.
should. Sonic 2. No.
That didn't come out last year.
No, I didn't. I was winding up for it before you said last year. Do you mean the movie that like blew every other movie out of the water? Do you mean the movie that
Almost like everybody didn't go to movies for like a whole year and then finally went to a movie? That movie?
All right, so the spoilers start right here. We're going to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. It's been out in theaters since December of last year, 2021 is how you say that. Yep. I don't know why I can't say 2021.
Because it sounds like a made-up year. I will give you that.
It does, right? 2021 didn't happen. It's still 1995 for me. So Spider-Man No Way Home, it came out December of last year, but because of the fact that we like the pandemic decided I'm going to ramp up just as the Spider-Man movie came out, a lot of people didn't get a chance to go out to theater to see it. So then it released digitally like 2 months ago, and now it's finally on DVD. So it's one of those things that is out there and that it is available. If you haven't seen it, but you want to see it, if you have Redbox where you are, you can rent it for $2. And if you send me a copy of your Redbox receipt for a $2 rental to @DevonDDecker on Twitter, I'll figure out a way to compensate you. Let's just invite that into my life.
Do you know, did digital rentals start up alongside the digital, the physical release? Because I know for a while it was just digital purchase, right?
Yeah, I believe it was. I guess yeah. So yeah, rentals don't start until physicals go on sale. So that's just how that works. So yeah, you could buy it, but the cost to buy it was like $20. It wasn't like an
right, but you could rent
amount.
It. It was So if you were gonna see it, you were paying to buy, paying to purchase.
Yeah, you were paying to purchase, but like a movie that by all accounts was the movie. I joked talking to Have Guy about how he might not have seen the 2002 Spider-Man movie, that it was kind of the Godfather of our generation. Because it's just insane to me to think that like there might be people our age who never saw Spider-Man, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man.
No, I mean, especially considering how definitive it kind of became in light of other attempts to get comic book movies off the ground not working, right? Like X-Men, we've revisited on this very show before, and we've talked about it's kind of the like yes or no of that, and it was successful, but not critically or like beloved in the ways and like not as long lasting nearly as Spider-Man, and specifically Spider-Man 2. Like, let's be honest, if you're going to talk about any Spider-Man movie that needs to be seen from that era, like Spider-Man 2 is it, right?
Yeah, Spider-Man 2 kind of has everything. Spider-Man 2 is so iconic that the way that they sold Spider-Man No Way Home was with Dr. Octavius being played by Alfred Molina.
And, I think a part of that has to do with the fact that one of the big things that we get kind of sick of with Spider-Man was the origin story, right? It's the Bruce Wayne problem, where like we don't need to keep seeing Uncle Ben get killed in the street, and they to the point where they learned that lesson with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, right? And so it's really interesting that a lot of people hold that love for that particular one, because I think it just solidifies that idea that like we're not looking for an origin story all the time, but we do want some growth in the hero, right? And so it just just an interesting fact that like for all of the ones that people loved before, it was the one that, funny enough, didn't have the whole origin set up to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. But we're going to talk more about Spider-Man from 2002 because it's the 30th anniversary of that film this year. Not the 30th, it's the 20th anniversary. I'm an idiot. I don't know why. I have 30s on the
These
brain.
late 2000s, 20s is going to be a fucking mess for you, man.
Like, yeah, I'm so sorry. Because I was just celebrating the 30-year anniversary of stuff over the weekend, just like for fun, not for the show. So yeah, so it's the 20-year anniversary of that original Sam Raimi Spider-Man film, and in May we're doing a very special episode on that. So bear with us with the Seth Rogen stuff, bear with us with the Superbad, because Spider-Man is coming, and this is also kind of a teaser because Spider-Man No Way Home, it leans heavily on the history of Spider-Man films that came before it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, like we've talked before about the FOMO of needing to know what's going on the Marvel universe, like the MCU, to kind of get into these movies. And you do need a little bit of that, or you might like to have a little bit of that for the stuff that goes on in this movie. But more than that, now you need to reach back even further. And like now you've got FOMO for just superhero films in general, right? Like, yeah, this movie is not afraid to fucking run with that, like, that nostalgia need for its story love. It's crazy.
This film, Spider-Man No Way Home, is easily the most additive film that has come out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Is it because it then not only adds itself but every other movie in the Spider-Man, and then thus Marvel universe? Like, Howard the Duck is officially canon at this point, right? After this movie,
I would feel that way. I mean, like, everybody calls it different stuff. It should just be the MCM, the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse. Like, I think that's the easiest way to do it. And I guess that's kind of close to MGM, so that's why they don't want to, I don't know. But MCM is sort of what I call it in my head, is that they've now created the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse, and everything is together. And that's easy when Disney owns kind of everything, or at least is willing to get the other boys to play with their toys in their sandbox.
UMCU, the Ultimate Marvel, because, like, stick with your branding, right? Or Marvel Ultimate, MUCU.
MUCU, I don't know. Ultimate
Marvel
leads to a
Cinematic
different thing
Universe.
because of the Ultimate Universe in the comics, and the fact that it had gotten so muddy that they had to just destroy it and pull forward from it the stuff that was still working.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you not think that that's what's about to happen with the movies, considering what they've now done, and then everything that's now gone on over the last couple of weeks with the reveal that Morbius is just, as far as everybody's concerned, just in the universe now? Because it is. Because, like, I can't really argue with them.
Vulture came over, and Vulture knows who Spider-Man is still, and that Peter Parker is Spider-Man by all accounts. I feel like he still has that information. So I don't know. We will see what happens with the Sony Spider-Man Cinematic Universe, the SSCU. There's so many everybody's got a cinematic universe, including Adam Sandler maybe. And you can listen to that on our other podcast, the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe. But yes, so hey, so now that it's all together, but I guess the reason why I call it the most additive is that unlike something like Infinity War, which tried to give you like a kind of a brief, this is who this character is, like every character sort of still got an introduction in that movie. Mm-hmm. It's one of the reasons why I really like Infinity War is they wanted to make sure it was a catch-all for people who maybe didn't go see all the movies that were leading up to it.
Yeah, so maybe you just go to the Avengers films. Yeah. Here's what you need to know as an Avengers film watcher, right? Yeah.
They did a really good job with Infinity War. It's why it's my favorite Avengers film, because they were able to make it entertaining but still also like educational in a way to understand everything that was going on in the world.
Yeah.
But Spider-Man No Way Home, it expects you to have read the material before coming to class. This is the required reading to fully understand what's going on. And if you don't do that reading, you're going to probably have some questions afterwards.
I would say, though, they've always used Spider-Man as like a coda, right? Like they've always used him as kind of the what's the word here? Like the last couple of like chapters after the finale there.
The epilogue?
Epilogue, thank you. That's exactly the word I was looking for. They've always used him as an epilogue in the MCU specifically. So this idea, like, this isn't the first time that you've kind of felt that way. Like first Spider-Man, it felt that way just because of the ways in which Spider-Man was kind of half introduced in Civil War, but then add to that they don't do the origin story, so you're just expected to kind of get along with that. Like there's a lot of that attitude in that first one too. And then in the second one, the loss of Tony Stark being such a huge aspect to it. And like, yeah, you're introduced to the idea that Tony's gone, but like that is like, you know, that is something that you're expected to also be feeling. That movie plays on your heartstrings, hoping that you care as much about Tony Stark as Peter does, right? And like, so these movies specifically, the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, you know, Homecoming, No Way Home, and or Far From Home, and then No Way Home, have all really played with the idea that this is one for the guys that have been paying attention. And so like that's par for the course as far as I'm concerned. And they just, as I said before, they just blew it out to 1,000, because in addition to needing to know all the stuff that's gone on in the MCU up till now, everything that you needed to know in every Spider-Man movie up till now with Tom Holland, also every Spider-Man movie period.
Yeah, you need to have seen every Spider-Man movie to fully grasp it. And there is no greater like bit of evidence than the fact that my mother and father, my mother was so upset after Amazing Spider-Man in 2012 that we were driving home and she's like, I saw that movie 10 years ago. I saw that exact movie 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I get it, Mom. I'm sorry. She's like, no, I was excited because a new actor and Emma Stone and all this, but I saw that movie 10 years ago. Why was it just the same movie? And I'm like, I did that because they rebooted. I don't know what to tell you, Mom. I'm sorry. And because of how upset she was at that one, she flat out refused to go see Amazing Spider-Man 2, even though all of the marketing was like, this is going to be its own thing. We know that last one was kind of just the 2002 movie with a different actor playing Spider-Man.
Yeah, well, and then Amazing Spider-Man 2 gets shit on for not being classic enough.
For being its own thing.
I think Amazing Spider-Man 2 is one of the most unfairly burned movies in a long time as far as this genre goes. Like, I understand the idea that it doesn't stack up for some people, but there is some really good stuff in that movie that is just like completely lost to the ages because it's considered not as good as anything that had come before it in terms of the Sam Raimi stuff. And it's a shame.
It really, because I had only seen Amazing Spider-Man 2 one time in theaters, probably one of my top 3 worst experiences in a movie theater, because I for some reason I went on a Saturday night at like 8 p.m. It was full, like it was the most people I've ever seen in the movie
I'm just
theater.
laughing because like I'm sure that there's 100% of our listeners are just like, that's when you go to the movies, Devon.
Right, no, right, exactly. But I've explained enough, right? This is also going to be a pretty additive episode of the Say Report, aside from the fact that the first 55 minutes were basically references to the Say Report, and explanations for where they came from. But yeah, it's one of those situations where if you've been listening, that's not generally when I go. I try to go early in the day, and I try to go on off days so that I'm not fighting for a seat or like I have a spot where I want to sit in the theater. And if I go at 8 o'clock on a Saturday and arrive,
Devon time.
Yeah. Yes. So it's one of those, like, it was just an awful experience to go see it. But then knowing that Electro was going to be in No Way Home, because he was also really heavily leaned into in the marketing for this film. Right. I'm like, I need to watch Amazing Spider-Man 2 again. And it was like a religious experience for me. This movie's actually really good. Why do we shit on it? Why do we treat it the way that we treat it? This is awesome.
There is definitely some goofy ass shit in it.
Oh, like, yeah.
There's some stuff that happens with the transformation of Electro that's really weird. There's some kind of like weird CGI, like cartoonish to it that is way more Sam Raimi than you saw in the first one, right? Like there's definitely things that you can pick apart with Spider-Man 2.
They weirdly make it more like the Sam Raimi films, because even though they tread the same ground in the first Amazing Spider-Man film, it really felt like its own world and universe, especially when you look at like George Stacy and Gwen Stacy being prominent characters in that film. Right. And the fact that like Harry Osborn is not there in the first movie at all. Like
Right.
it is so much a different type of Spider-Man. And then what they do in the second movie is they kind of lean into the weirder, goofier Sam Raimi elements, as if that's the way that we're going to try to capture what people felt was missing from that first movie.
They also they much like Morbius selling itself on Michael Keaton, they sell themselves on Paul Giamatti. In that, and he's in the first 5 minutes of the last 5 minutes, and that's it, folks. Like, spoiler alert for Amazing Spider-Man 2. But if the reason you're going is to see Paul Giamatti playing the Rhino, it ain't worth it for that.
Now that's a Sejohn's Gambit, man. That's a huge Sejohn's Gambit. Everything that they showed with Paul Giamatti as sort of the face of the marketing. The only reason I knew that Electro was going to be as big a deal as he was because I had the Marvel Legends figure that released on New Year's Day. I went to Toys R Us on New Year's Day and bought the Electro figure, and then like reading about him, like, oh, this is going to be the main guy in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Why isn't the marketing reflecting that?
Yeah, and they wanted to pull one over on people. I don't know, like it was that.
And I was excited, and I was specifically excited because of Electro being like one of the second villains that Spider-Man really fought. Like it felt like a cool way to honor the actual comic origins of this character in ways that like Sam Raimi very much was doing his own thing. But then when it's George Stacy and Gwen Stacy and everything that's happening in Amazing Spider-Man, I'm like, oh, this is sort of hewing closer to the comics that I learned because of how much I liked that 2002 film.
Yeah.
Sorry. So rewatching it was.
So rewatching Spider-Man 2 is required viewing, right?
Yeah, if I hadn't rewatched Amazing Spider-Man 2, because my mother still hasn't seen it, even though I own it, and I'm like, I think you and Dad would really like it now that we're however many years removed. That's 2014, right? So now that we're 7 years removed from when that movie came out, I think you guys would actually enjoy it because of everything that's there, and you're away from the zeitgeist. But my mother straight refuses. So then that whole thing, we are not covering No Way Home in any sort of order. We are unstuck in time with this one. When Toby Mcguire and Andrew Garfield go to the Midtown Magnet High roof to get Tom Holland Spider-Man, and, you know, Toby Mcguire talks about losing Ben, and then Andrew Garfield talks about losing Gwen. Driving home that first time we saw the movie, my mother's like, who the fuck is Gwen? Who's he talking about? And I'm like, it's Emma Stone. It's his girlfriend. She dies in Amazing Spider-Man 2. You never saw that movie. Oh, because I had no idea who the fuck that was. And then even last night, she's like, I have questions. During the scene, the same way that she said it in the movie theater, I have questions. And then as soon as the credits roll and everything's done, she goes, who the fuck is Gwen? And it's like,
oh, man.
You still haven't seen the movie that she's in. And until you do, you're not going to understand the emotional impact of the whole storyline of kind of Andrew Garfield's character in this movie.
Yeah. It's weird because, like, I never want to be the guy that's like, oh, you have to read the comics in order to get the thing, and you have to see this movie in order to get that movie. So, like, go ahead and see this movie. I think you will still enjoy it, but this is one of those few times I'm going to say, I don't know if you're going to care if you haven't seen this other stuff. So, like, see this thing and let me know what you think, I guess, because, like, man, yeah, like, all of this stuff with him is completely with I don't feel the same way with Toby Mcguire that I do with him. I feel like with Toby Mcguire, we kind of got this understanding in the 3 movies that he got to make. Also, maybe it's just been just long enough for us to kind of be in this place where, like, he shows up as this older Peter Parker, and you kind of get the feeling that a lot has happened between now and then that we don't know. So it's kind of okay if you don't really know much about his Spider-Man because nobody does. So, like, the ways in which they fill in the blanks about how things have happened, we're all learning that stuff for the first time. Whereas with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, I feel like everything feels like it's like a direct reference to what happened in those movies. And so, like, they've expected you to see those. It's really interesting, the balance between those two, how it feels like with the Tobey Maguire one. I don't know if I'd tell you have to see those before you watch this. Maybe for Dr. Octopus, so, like, see 2, but I wouldn't tell you have to see all 3 of them. Whereas, like, with Amazing Spider-Man, like, at least see 2, I guess. But, man, watch them both.
Yeah, they're both really good. The lizard stuff in the first one is very interesting, but they also, the one that they really care about, right? Because Sony is involved in this film, right? Spider-Man No Way Home is not just a Marvel joint; it is a mashup piece between these two studios. Because Tom Holland was like, "We should finish this stuff. I know you guys are having a fight about Spider-Man, but let's do one last movie together." And so Sony's like, yeah, I'm up for it, but this is what I want to do. And then Disney's like, we don't really fucking care. Because at the end of the day, we don't need to do another Spider-Man movie if you don't want the money, Sony.
Yeah.
Like,
never forget that Disney just walked away from that table, and Sony had to scramble to get them back because Disney just up and straight up like wrote Tom Holland out of Comic-Con that year. Like it was an intense reaction from Disney that Sony somehow didn't expect, and I don't know how they didn't expect it.
Yeah, I mean, like, Disney is literally, Disney unfortunately has all the power to do that. Sony has power too, but not in the entertainment space like that.
Well, especially at that point, because remember, they were kind of still licking their wounds from all of that shit going on with the hack and the leak of all of their shit. So, like, they'd had years of just looking like fools left and right. I mean, yeah, it was just crazy that Sony thought that they could pull a power play.
They also had that big dick energy from Into the Spider-Verse succeeding as well as it did, like a Spider-Man thing that they did completely unaffiliated with the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, but then Disney just turned right around when they swung their dick like that, and Disney just patted them on the head and said, "That's cute," and then walked away.
Disney's like, "All right, cool, enjoy that then. We don't need him. We don't need him in our live action stuff. You don't want that Marvel money? You think you can do it on your own?"
Who do you think that they called? Who do you think that they called when just like, because you had to put somebody on deck when that shit was happening, right? Even if you are Disney and you're thinking, oh, we might have to walk away from Spider-Man, you're going to do it with your head held high because you're then going to trot somebody out. Who is it though, right? Who is going to be that person that's going to become the center of the Marvel, right? Like,
who's going to become the new guy? I honestly don't know at the time. I mean, the short answer is Doctor Strange.
Yeah,
because that's who it's become. Doctor Strange, the big plan in the wake of the Endgame was Peter Parker is going to become the new Tony Stark of this universe.
Right. He's going to become that central figure that everything kind of revolves around. They needed an anchor.
Right. And the fact that he gets Edith and that Tony Stark says, "You are my choice to do this," right? Like, you're the person that was always going to be my successor. That was the plan. But then once Sony starts dicking around with it, Doctor Strange is the one that they decide, no, Stephen Strange can be the anchor. And you know what's great about having Doctor Strange as the anchor? He doesn't need to be anchored the same way that Tony Stark was. He just needs to be this presence that exists within the world to identify threats. And then once he identifies the threat, you can like zoom in through his eye and then the camera turns around to whatever threat is going on and then we deal with it. He just becomes connective tissue as the Sorcerer Supreme for Earth.
Yeah. Like, Peter just makes so much sense because, I mean, he's young. He's got the element of like kind of the ability to play both sides of the I've been doing this long enough that I know what I'm doing to the whole I'm so still new at this, I need advice. So he can meet anybody. The thing about Strange for me is that Strange is not the guy that goes to anybody else for advice. So it's always going to have to be people coming to him, right? Unless something friggin' crazy happens and he like needs to like leave planet or something. Maybe. So like I was expecting somebody more like Captain Marvel, right? Which would have been a hard swing considering the reception of Brie Larson and Captain Marvel, but like that seemed like the most logical place to go next, right? Is let's aim our face like skyward and go with that. Yeah, I have no idea. Who.
I mean, Doctor Strange, I think, sort of falls into that role because the two main characters, the two main heroes introduced in 2016 to this world are Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and Benedict Cumberbatch's Doctor Strange.
Yeah,
so it
makes sense why then you have so much of him built into this movie.
Right, and also you have the idea that since he's not the Sorcerer Supreme, since Wong is the Sorcerer Supreme, they add that little wrinkle to it. Wong of all the characters that have ever been in like Doctor Strange comics is willing to go to people. Wong is personable. Wong is not the fucking misanthrope that Dr. Stephen Strange is.
Yeah, right.
So
exactly.
he will go out and he will approach somebody. He will bring them back to the Sanctum Sanctorum, where Dr. Strange is essentially crashing on the couch.
I'm worried they're going to pull some old school bullshit with Wong and not let him have his day. I'm hoping I'm proved wrong, because Marvel always proves me wrong, but I'm getting some bad vibes about like we're setting this guy up to like kill him off next movie or something. I hope not.
Oh my God. He finally got a great figure. Like he finally got a Legends figure. It looks so much like the actor. And I'm just like, keep him here, because that's the smartest way to do it. You have him. If he's the Sorcerer Supreme, then he has like higher rules that he has to follow, and then Strange gets to be really it's War Machine and it's Iron Man.
Exactly.
And it works. I mean, it's also those two in a lot of gross ways too, in terms of the white man where there are no consequences and the minority character who has to follow the rules.
Yeah, exactly. You're not wrong.
Like there's not so great imaging there, but it is one of those situations where they kind of have found a way to have Doctor Strange be this connective tissue. I mean, think about even looking at something like What If, where the main like impetus to everything being connected on the good end, not on the evil end. The evil end is, Infinity Ultron, but Doctor Strange from What If He Lost His Heart Instead of His Hands becomes the anchor point for the multiversal Avengers. And spoilers for the trailers of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, I'm fairly certain that the Doctor Strange who shows up is that same What If He Lost His Heart, Not His Hands character.
Yeah.
Like, it feels very much like it's that character. So, like, everything seems to be, like, all of their marketing for everything that they did with, like, Anthony Mackie's transition from Falcon to Captain America, and all of the other groundwork that they started to lay down with things like Shang-Chi and the Eternals. The central pillar of the Avengers really feels like Doctor Strange right now. Yeah. So if we got to talk about who do you bring to the table, you bring Benedict Cumberbatch, who literally has that international recognition and acclaim.
Yeah, well, and he perfectly services as the Tony Stark stand-in in this movie in No Way Home. Like the ways in which he plays that older Avenger that Peter has to kind of rely on for guidance, and also also has to eventually learn to disobey because they're not always right? Like that whole element right? It felt like watching him with Tony again in a good way, like in the best way possible. But yeah, the utilization of Strange in this story is so good. I actually walked out of it feeling like this might be the best characterization of him that I've seen yet. Like I loved him in this movie, and like seeing the ways in which he knows what he's doing, is bending the rules, is still kind of wagging his finger at Peter, like all of these elements of Strange wrapped up in what couldn't be more than 30 minutes of screen time tops.
Yeah.
For this whole, if you include the stuff at the end as well.
Yeah, it sounds about like 30 minutes seems pretty correct. At most it's 45. It's 30 to 45 minutes of screen time, and it's closer to 30 than anything else. And it really is. But then also I think about the fact that like we're introduced to Spider-Man and we're introduced to Strange in 2016. Strange is also still a relatively new hero, right? So he gets to be green and he gets to make these like mistakes, right? We talked briefly about Eric Arnold coming to me and saying, why didn't Doctor Strange just use the Time Stone to stop Thanos, or any of these other spells that he has? Why couldn't he make Thanos just forget that the Infinity Stones exist if he could make everybody forget about Peter Parker? And the situation is because Doctor Strange is not as powerful as he is known to be in the comics yet.
Also, have you seen the movie? The spell kind of doesn't work. like I mean, this is a weird question considering the whole point of what he does is he's like, I don't know, this seems like this is a big ask, and then they fuck it up.
Yeah. So it's one of those situations, but like he's still green, which is also a really cool way to look at a character like Doctor Strange, who pretty much from go in the comics was the best of the best.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I just accept that. But having his ego be his weakness, his hubris be his weakness, and actually seeing what that means has been very interesting for Doctor Strange. And it's a main driving plot point in No Way Home, because his hubris and the way that he's just so cavalier about stuff, like, oh, immediately we'll jump to erasing you. Because the idea that, like, what, you never appealed the decision with MIT, that probably should have been the conversation, right? And if he were more studied, I think he would have gotten there before he's like, yeah, we'll just fuck with the world. That sounds like fun.
Yeah. No, he did. He mistakes himself as, and I mean, and this is made clear in the lines of the movie. Like, this is not like me, like, putting something on. He mistakes himself for being Peter's equal very early on, and realizes, oh no, I need to remember that I'm the adult. And so there is that element of him still growing and learning in that, right? And that's what I mean, is like, it's awesome just to watch this character, like, start to have all of these really intricate facets of himself that his own movie didn't give him. Like, I love that movie, but like, I'd be hard pressed to talk about the complex characterization of Steven in that movie. Like, he's an asshole, and he's an asshole at the end of it too.
He's an asshole. That's his superpower in Doctor Strange 2016. And what he's learning through things like Infinity War, Endgame, and now No Way Home is that being an asshole is not going to work all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge part. It's a huge lesson for him.
It's a huge, and that's why in the Spider-Man movie we are giving 15 minutes to Doctor Strange, because it's hyper important. It's also, this is the second time that I've watched the film, right? I watched it in theaters in December. We rented out a whole theater, so I get to, like, check that one off my bucket list. I got to do that one time in my life. I don't know if I would ever do it again. It was fun for Spider-Man. I don't know if I would ever do it again. But then, watching it again last night, it was a different experience because there's no anticipation, right? It's something that I've been here before, so I get to watch it with different eyes in a different thing. And what I took away from watching this film a second time is how fucking pissed off I was at the Avengers.
Yeah.
I was... Yeah.
Just because they leave everybody high and dry, like what do you?
So obviously we've been living with the MCU for long enough, and a lot of the times it's kind of explained why all of these other superpowered beings can't just show up when one of their friends is in trouble, right? The fact that, and they started that very early on, the fact that Iron Man 2, the events of the Incredible Hulk, and the events of is it Thor? Yeah, all of those movies are going on simultaneously in the world. So it's one of the reasons why Iron Man can't go investigate Mjolnir in New Mexico, because he's dealing with whiplash. And none of them can go help with the Incredible Hulk situation because they're all preoccupied.
Well, there's also really good world building to justify things like they're not being informed of stuff, right? Like, you talk about specifically Mjolnir landing before anything else happens, which we know that Clark Gregg Coulson, thank you, that Coulson goes and shows up and is looking into it. But there's no way that Coulson and S.H.I.E.L.D. would ever fill Tony in until, like, unless they needed him, right? So you also get so in addition to the idea that we're given a timeline in which we kind of know certain things are happening on top of each other, on top of that, we're also given in-world characters like Fury. Like, Fury is the big example of this, who are specifically making it a point to hide things from other people, one another, so that they are not, quote unquote, distracted and things like that. So, like, they're laying that groundwork on two levels.
Yeah, it's important for Tony Stark to stop Justin Hammer from developing his Iron Legion. You can't be distracted by the Incredible Hulk and by a space god in New Mexico.
Well, and you know, Fury's not necessarily capable of stopping Tony from living his life and stumbling into stupid shit, but he is definitely capable of keeping Mjolnir off the news long enough to make sure that Tony doesn't see it and get any ideas.
And then also it goes a step further when the fact that he assigns Black Widow to be sort of a secret handler for Tony Stark to make sure that he's invested and he's focused on the things that are going on in his world and not in his spare time looking for other things to do as Iron Man. They do a really good job of making all of that work. Yet, so like I can always kind of explain in the way why, that's why he didn't show up to help, because he was busy, and also that he can deal with this sort of situation, right? Iron Man knows what he's doing. We know that Tony can do what he has to, so the events of Iron Man 3 can happen without anybody assisting him, right? Because he doesn't really need the help, because he's Tony Stark. We know that. Peter Parker, up to this point, hasn't really done anything alone. He's always sort of been supervised in some way, shape, or form.
We are given the impression that this particular Peter Parker has been kind of on his own a little bit before Civil War. We have to give him that.
Yeah. But so every time that we've checked in with him.
But yeah. Every time that we've checked in with him at that point. I mean, let's be honest. From Civil War on, we know Tony was keeping tabs on him.
Yes. We even if it's just Happy showing up, or it's literally Tony coming to help with the Roosevelt Ferry when that comes down, and then the whole speech that happens there. Like Homecoming, he has Tony watching his back. In Far From Home, even though it's eventually revealed to be Talos in disguise, Nick Fury is there. S.H.I.E.L.D. is there, helping him out with the situation.
Right.
So then it is revealed that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, right? And they say so many fucking times that he is the most famous person in the world, that everybody knows who that is. And the fact that no other Avenger like checks in on him or tries to help him go through that is crazy to me. And like some of them are off the table because we know what's going on in Westview with Scarlet Witch, because she would be a really great person to kind of walk someone through becoming a public enemy after what happened in Civil War, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they take her off the table. They do a good job of taking her off the table. Scott's not doing anything. You don't think Scott would come by with fucking tacos to throw the ball around? Where is Hulk in all of this? And the most egregious one is someone like Doctor Strange, who lives in the same fucking city as him and can't check in. The only superhero who has Peter Parker's back is Daredevil.
Yeah.
And he has his back as Matt Murdock.
Yeah.
Like, it's just one of these situations where, like, I get it. I get that you are the Avengers, and generally you all kind of handle your own shit. But in this situation, where a 17-year-old kid is left to his own devices to deal with this, like, Pepper Potts can't step in and be like, he was working under the authority of Stark Enterprises, and reveal that guy used to work for Stark Enterprises. Like, it's so absurd, like, how much the deck is stacked against him, and just how there's no other option than to erase the minds of everybody in the universe. So
there's a couple of things about this, though, right?
Yeah.
Is this idea that, like, part of it is the issue is that, first of all, this all happens in a matter of like a day or two, right? Like how long is it? Is it from the time it's revealed to the time he goes to Strange? I guess it is like a few weeks, because he has to go to trial and all that, right?
They have to wait for acceptance letters from 3 colleges.
Yeah.
So like
it's a while.
It's like, it feels like 6 months. 6 months is what I would say.
There's definitely this feeling that Peter kind of gets kind of forgotten about, kind of in the mix, and that's kind of
a whole summer passes. A whole fucking summer passes, because they went on their trip to Europe. That was supposed to be 2 weeks after the end of high school, right?
Right.
So at least 2 months pass before he is going into the first day of his senior year of high school.
Yeah, and so there's this idea that Peter is kind of the one that just kind of gets left behind and forgotten about. And the thing is that that's kind of important for Peter's like whole thing as being this kind of coda at the end of each of these seasons, right? Is that he kind of needs to be the kid that's just like happy to be included, and everybody else is just like, oh right, and then he's the Wonder Twins of this Justice League. Like he's
Gleep of this. He's the Wonder Twins fucking blue monkey.
And there's this idea that that's kind of just the way that he is, and he needs to grow up. He needs to get out of that if he's going to become this part of the Avengers, which we'll see if that happens going forward. I don't
think it will, but
I
think he's going to fight Morbius and the Vulture before he does any of that.
Well, remember that part of the deal is that Disney now owns Spider-Man. Sony got to keep all of the villains. And so that's part of the deal is that, so the problem is that Disney can't do it can't do a Spider-Man movie without a villain, so they need to include Sony, and Sony can't do a villain movie without Spider-Man, or can they, is kind of what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Like that is the basically understood deal that is going on right now. So Disney can use Spider-Man in other movies and stuff like that, but if they ever want to make a Spider-Man centric movie and use a villain and characters within that world that are like Spidey centric, like they can't do it without Sony coming in to help. So it may not be the last time that we see Spider-Man, but it might very well be the last time we see a Spider-Man only film. I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, could it be the last time that we see Peter Parker too?
Maybe.
The fact that the world forgot who Peter Parker is, but clearly still knows who Spider-Man is, means that Spider-Man can still go out and do Spider-Man things, but we're never going to see... I mean, he has no ties anymore because nobody remembers him.
Yeah, part of the problem with that theory, as much as I would say, like, yeah, he can always just show up and just be in a CGI costume. You don't even have to have an actor on set. The problem is that this particular version of Marvel, the MCU, loves the mask-off version of their characters. So, like, it'd be actually kind of awkward if Spider-Man never took his mask off for the rest of his time in these movies, right?
I mean, it'd be kind of awkward, but then I think about something like the Avengers game from Square Enix, where everybody is masks off and all of the Spider-Man stuff, even though it's kind of atrocious, a lot of that stuff, it is very much, I'll be keeping the mask on, and there is not a single costume that doesn't have him in the mask, even when it doesn't make any fucking sense for him to have a mask
Well, exactly,
on.
Right? And that's part of the problem that people will have with the story in that game, and I just don't see the MCU allowing that. But yeah, we'll have to see with that stuff. But just the ways in which he kind of has to be that character. He has to fit into that mold. By the time you get to this movie, it does get to be a little ridiculous. But now they've completely given him justification for that to be a thing going forward, because now nobody ever knows that Peter Parker is whatever, so nobody's keeping an eye on Peter, right?
How does he live? Like, does he still have a social security number? Is he still Peter Parker, but just nobody knows who he is?
I think it's going to be that he is completely off grid, that he does not have a social security number, that the apartment that he lives in the city that he's in, I mean, he's basically going to be an illegal immigrant going forward in this world, like unless something else changes.
Unless he goes to the Sony Spider-Man cinematic universe where he's got full citizenship. Just to lean into your metaphor and kind of make myself want to retch with what we're talking about.
But like, that's basically what he's going to have to do, is he's going to have to live as a person that is illegally within the country. So he probably won't have a social security number, and he'll have to work under the table and for shit jobs. It'll be a great way to explain how we got this kid that was completely backed by Tony Stark and able to afford the world now suddenly has to try and make ends meet delivering pizzas. Like it is a perfect transition for the character, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if we get to see it, because that's the other thing is, watching it this second time, there was that thought that like, so I don't know if we're going to see any more Peter Parker stuff in this movie, in these movies, or if it's just going to be Spider-Man.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's part of the whole, like, meeting these other Spider-Men too. It does feel like a finale, because we are kind of getting to say goodbye to all of them, right? Because, like, anybody that doesn't know, the eventual reveal in this movie is that they pull in Andrew Garfield and Toby Mcguire's Spider-Mans, and they all meet, right? Like, you know, do the Spider-Man meme, everybody. But like that idea that they all get to talk to each other and kind of connect and discuss what their different worlds are like and why, different decisions that they made and when they made them in their lives and how that affected them. And like, it's really interesting. And what it allows is closure on all three of them. So you're not wrong in that it does feel like this could be the last Spider-Man movie. I guess what my hope is it's not. And what I think will happen is we'll probably just see Spider-Man just pop in from time to time and stuff. Maybe show up in the whatever big event movies happen, if they happen again.
I kind of hope it's like the Lego Marvel games, where Spider-Man shows up, makes them all look like idiots, and then leaves. That was just always the funniest thing about those games. But those are more comedically slanted, so I don't know if that would really work in like an MCU type situation. But yeah, the other thing that this film does that I absolutely love is it pays for the sins of all the films that came before it. Because for some fucking reason, we thought it was impossible to end a superhero movie in the early 2000s without killing the villain.
Yeah.
Like, in this way that, like, yeah, we're going to just take Dr. Octopus off the table and kill him at the end of Spider-Man 2. We're just going to take the Green Goblin off the table. Now, the Green Goblin, just by the nature of the fact that they killed him too early, and that was one of the things that they learned, is that, like, maybe we don't always kill the villains, because then we're left with having to explain why they're back.
And don't miss a key feature to that. It's also not that they get to survive and still be a villain. That also happens in this movie with a couple of them. But the idea being that you can also end a story with the villain not like giving up their life of crime and not dying. There's a third option. They don't have to either continue being a villain, because that's the other problem with the Sam Raimi movies, is you do have a couple of people that do end up surviving to the next movie, but what then they end up doing is they end up becoming the bad guys.
Yep. Looking at you, James Franco. Sad that he's not in this movie. just a little bit. I like his Harry. I like his Harry a lot. I'm gonna just
I like
be
James Franco's Harry. I think, considering everything that's happened with Franco over the years, I'm okay not having to
to do the mental gymnastics. Fair.
Yeah, to enjoy this film, right? Yeah. No, so this movie, so as Devon has pointed out, the other thing this movie does is it goes out of its way to pull in all of these phenomenal villains from over the years, from all of these Spider-Man movies, and give us arcs for each of them. Like, I think the other big sin that it pays for is it really kicks the door down on the idea that you can't have more than one villain, which everybody says that was what killed Spider-Man 3. And this movie proves, no, it wasn't quite that. It was kind of Sam Raimi's refusal to do what the studio wanted, and the studio's refusal to let Sam Raimi do what he wanted. So that movie kind of was like the product of two feuding parents more than it was like, oh, they put too much into it. Because there's 7 villains in this movie?
Well, technically, the major villain of this movie, and that's my favorite part about it, is J. Jonah Jameson. J. Jonah Jameson would be considered the main antagonist of this film, in the fact that the smear campaign that he is performing on Peter Parker as Spider-Man is atrocious. And even to the fact that, when everything really goes bad at Happy's condo, it is because Jonah Jameson gets there and calls media attention to what's happening. It's really interesting. So there's at least 6 villains in this movie, because you have Norman Osborn, Willem Dafoe, Green Goblin, Alfred Molina, Dr. Octopus, Thomas Hayden Church, who was on set at least for one day, Flint Marko Sandman. You have Rhys Ifans as Kurt Connors the Lizard, and you have Jamie Foxx as Electro, Max Dillon. Look at that. I knew all their names still. I'm a nerd sometimes.
Sometimes. So you also have this collection of villains that show up, and it becomes this story for Peter to try and figure out, is there a way that I can save these people? Not necessarily kill them, not let them run off to commit crimes another day, but is there a way that I can fix these people? And it becomes a really interesting story and a really interesting critique of just the Marvel movies, of every Marvel movie up to this point. Is really beautiful, and I think really setting up some of this stuff going forward with the ways in which Marvel is going to start playing with good guys and bad guys being on different sides. We can talk about Civil War all we want, but the idea more specifically that somebody like Loki, who was a main villain for the first arc of this entire franchise, has now been turned into this leading man character for their television show that is going to go on to be an important figure in their TV universe as a hero factor, right? So there's this idea that Marvel is going to start playing with that kind of concept. And then you mentioned J. Jonah Jameson. That's the other big way that this movie ties things together, is not just opening the doors to a different universes so these characters can all interact, but literally opening to the doors the idea that because this person existed in this world, there's an XP for them in our world. And so J. Jonah Jameson is not the J. Jonah Jameson from the Toby Mcguire universe, the Raimi-verse. He is a different one, but he's the same actor playing that, which is a whole other way to open the doors for stuff like this. I would love to see other characters in these movies show up, Maybe we can finally get what was his name, Dylan Baker, finally playing
Kurt Connors.
That would be so good to finally get him in costume on set, right?
Yeah, I mean, by all accounts, there's supposed to be a Craven movie coming to the Sony Spider-Man Cinematic Universe next year at some point. And that would really, and there's a lot of calls to finally make Spider-Man 4. And I'd love to see another Amazing Spider-Man film.
Imagine if in the Venom Morbius universe, it's Toby Mcguire's Spider-Man. Imagine if that's the reveal.
I would be happy if it were Andrew Garfield's, but I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, but like, right?
Yeah,
you already had Kurt Connors, right? And that's who Rhys Ifans was, isn't it?
Rhys Ifans is that, yes.
Rhys Ifans is that, yeah. So no. So like that's what I'm saying is like Dylan Baker was always being set up to be him in the Raimi verse, right? Yeah. Or I mean, hell, finally getting to have our guy there, Sam Axe, what's his name from Evil
Bruce
Dead?
Campbell.
Bruce Campbell finally getting to play Mysterio, right? With all the rumors about him over the years in the 3 Raimi movies.
God, I hope he shows up in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. We've said it so many times, but oh my God, I hope he shows up.
I still have money down. I still have money down that you get one scene and he hands over the Necronomicon, and it is that universe's Darkhold. I have money in a pot somewhere on that.
Dear God, I want Howard the Duck to show up. I want friggin' Duck Tit Howard the Duck to show up with friggin' Leah Thompson, and maybe they got a little duck baby, a duck human baby, and he's like, "Wow, me!"
with his hand up his ass.
Yeah, I'd love it. I just so much that I want to have happen there, but we're focusing on No Way Home here, and it is just. Yeah, it does. This movie, right? We just recently talked about this on the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe, and not even meaning to like toot our own other things, but something like That's My Boy, that film that Adam Sandler does, and that film feels like, this is what you think my movies are. Here's what I'm going to deliver to you. No Way Home feels like it took every criticism and critique about the Spider-Man films and was like, no, it can work if we're given the freedom to actually make the movie the way we want to, without studio interference.
Yeah.
With like, when it's the villains that we want there.
In the ways in which we want to do them, right? Because I think about the ways in which like Sandman is used, and like one of my favorite moments for Electro is there's this beautiful moment after he's been repowered where he's moving around and the shocks, like the effect around his face is the old mask.
Yeah.
And like it's that real like kick in the balls to that argument, like, oh, we can't use the old costumes, those all look really dumb. And we've seen even the MCU play with that. Like I think of like WandaVision, the Halloween episode where they're wearing their old costumes and it's really goofy, and that's the joke, right? But this movie is just like, no joke, like we can use that costume and just have it just be good.
Yeah. His Electro, this feels so like a redemption for the Electro character in so many ways.
Yeah, not as a character, but for the ways in which the character was underused or misused in that movie. Yeah.
Like the fact that he's a being of just energy in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, that's such a waste of what that character is. Mm-hmm. And it's really influenced by what he was in the Ultimate comic universe at the time, where that Max Dillon was a being of pure energy. So,
yeah, but he feels like basically like Dr. Manhattan for most of that movie. Like he gets exploded apart, literally builds himself back together. Like there's a lot of really weird Doc Manhattan energy going on in that movie. Actually,
I don't disagree. Yeah, and it makes sense when you consider that Watchmen had happened 5 years earlier. Mm-hmm. And also everything else that's going on in the world. It's one of those like disappointing things. So like the fact that it's Max Dillon, who's a human, like he gets his body back, and just how happy it is, and the way that they explain away the fact that it's because of arc reactor technology which fuels all of the energy in this universe, and that being a different, cleaner type of energy that makes Electro stronger and able to regain his human form is really interesting. And then on the other side of that, the fact that Sandman the entire film is stuck in his sand form.
Yeah.
And the explanation for that is one of my favorite things, not spoken in the movie, but like from the director. I mean, the real reason is that Tom Hayden Church was not available to be on set for more than one day. Like he was there to do the voice, but he couldn't be on set. He couldn't make the time commitment. I think he was busy shooting his one scene for Spanglish 2, but it was like, that's the thing. But then the actual, like the Marvel no prize reason for the fact why he cannot regain his human form is the fact that some of him was left in his own universe. So because all of the sand particles are not there, he cannot take on that human appearance. which is like also kind of horrifying.
Yeah.
In terms of the fact that, like, because he's relatively calm. I mean, Flint Marko was sort of this story of, we don't need to kill the villain. Maybe there can be redemption for this villain in a Spider-Man film, in Spider-Man 3, right? And Spider-Man 3, I promise someday we'll do, like, a full deep dive into that movie, because I'm excited to, especially rewatching it to prepare for, because it was another one that I had only seen the one time, and rewatching it, I'm like, yeah, I understand why in 2007 we were so mean to this movie, but it's not as bad. It's not as bad as it could be, or as bad as we treat it.
I don't know. There's elements of that movie that are almost unwatchable for me at times. We'll have to watch it.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that's why we dedicate a whole episode to it. But the fact that, like, so he's redeemed, and then you have his character in this one sort of be like, I'm just sort of stuck here until this freaking 17-year-old can fix all of you and give you back your lives, but like, he has so much at stake in the fact that, like, he literally needs to get back to the universe to be whole again.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, the extra layer that puts on his character. And also, like, how his first thing to Spider-Man is that, like, Peter, I can help you with this, because they end as allies in the third movie.
Right.
And it really works for me, like, really well.
I guess if you consider the idea of watching this movie as just a Tom Holland Spider-Man watcher, you are in kind of the same boat Tom Holland is, or is Peter is in this movie, of not really knowing these people, but like them having to kind of, man, it'd be so interesting to watch this movie and had not seen those other ones.
Yeah. I mean, you'd have to have not seen any of them. Going in completely blind to just see this movie. And there has to be people out there who did that. And if you're one of those people who stumbled upon our podcast, please reach out to us at The Say Report on Twitter or thesayreport@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from your experience with this movie, because, yeah, like, that whole situation, that there's a brief exposition dump once Spider-Man has all 5 villains sort of collected in the dungeon of the Sanctum Sanctorum, when they're talking, when Thomas Hayden Church is like, both of them died. They died in fights with Spider-Man. He got impaled on his own glider, and Otto fell into the river with his machine. And, like, if that was the first time you knew about those 2 characters, like, oh my God. Like,
yeah.
Like, and then also, like, one of the best scenes in this film, and I feel like nobody's really talking about it anytime that I've had discussions with this movie, is when Kurt Connors says to Max Dillon, "Did I die? Like, you need to tell me."
Yeah.
And he didn't. By all accounts, he didn't. He is alive at the end of Amazing Spider-Man, because they were very much planning for the Ridiculous Six-esque film. Like, Sinister Six was their plan. Like, even to the fact that even though Electro is killed in Amazing Spider-Man 2, they're like, well, he's still energy, so he can recollect at the end of the day.
Right, exactly.
Like, they were like, don't think that just because Jamie Foxx died, that means we've seen the last of Electro. There were so many articles written that way.
Yeah, man. I don't know. But all of that leads to this phenomenal, like, kind of team up and togetherness of this family that comes together in this movie, right? And leading the charge on that are these 2 in Otto Octavius and Norman Osborn, right? Like, the relationship between the 2 of them, the relationship with Peter, the relationship to the story. It is, I mean, it's a smart choice, first of all, leaning on those 2, because they are just simply just the heavy hitters in this group, plain and simple. And then on top of that, their individual characters' relationships with Peter are just so, like, important to them and to Peter. It's just, it was such a smartly written film in all aspects. But this is one of those ones that really kind of shined through for me specifically, is like focusing on Otto being, you know, the Otto that wants to be there for Peter, but we know that his arms are somehow in some way fucking with his whole sense of self, right? Like, that is something that we've known both in this movie and in that one, and in Spider-Man 2. And then, like, you know, the weird, like, don't know how to feel about Norman Osborn of this whole movie, which this movie just like relishes in, like whether or not you're gonna trust him, from like the first moment where you see him kind of leave his shit in the alley, to like him showing up at the homeless shelter that Aunt May works at, right? And then like the reveal at the end that he's been fucking playing him the entire time. It's so good. Like it's some of the best acting that I've ever seen in these movies. Just seeing the relationship going on between the two of them, and with Tom Holland of all, like with a Peter that is not their Peter.
I really like it is when he goes to feast and he sees Norman Osborn just kind of sitting there broken by all accounts from what has happened to him, and he's like, I saw Spider-Man in the advertising for this shelter and I figured he could help me, but you're not Spider-Man. You're not my Peter. Like, it's like one of those things where like, oh, there's so much depth to this character. We haven't seen him play just Norman Osborn in 20 years.
Yeah.
Like, cause, and the fact that he jumps right back into that character, and then the reveal later on that like the Goblin was not in control at that time. Like Norman had wrestled back control, but the Goblin was there watching and understanding the weaknesses of this Spider-Man to ultimately take over is awesome. It's just, it's so well built, and it is so disappointing to me. And again, talking personal experience with this film, that my mother feels like they were stupid to try to help everybody. That Aunt May, like, why does she try to see the good in everybody? And like, yeah, but that, it adds so many levels to the story and to the character of Spider-Man, because ultimately in the comics, he's not just murdering these people. It's not just his goal to destroy these people. He understands that with great power comes great responsibility.
Well, and to the kind of conversation we were having earlier about who becomes kind of your center, who becomes your rock, we have had the cynical Avengers for 15 years now. We want something with a little bit more hope in it. And so it's part of the reason that I'm kind of disappointed that we're going to have to depend on somebody like Stephen Strange, because Stephen Strange is still a cynic. The hope is that maybe they can come around to bringing that character around to being much more hopeful about the world. We'll see. But like the idea being that like Peter being this you can call it naivety, but like this character that is just full of hope for redemption is so important. It's what makes the last 30 minutes of this movie so hard, when you see this particular Peter like almost lose himself in revenge. And it's why you need those other two Peters to be there, is to kind of help him through and process these feelings so that he doesn't become another Tony Stark. Like, the fear is not that he's going to become a supervillain. The fear is that he's going to become just like the rest of the Avengers at this point.
Oh, God. Chills. Literal chills. A movie that I've seen, but the way that you put it, it is, yeah, him being ready to give into his base desires strictly for revenge against Norman Osborn for killing Aunt May, which, spoilers, Aunt May is the one who dies, which...
I almost didn't want to say it, like, say something, but yeah. Yeah.
It's such an important thing. And there's a reason why we waited so long to talk about this, to make sure that people had the time to see the film and experience it. Oh my God.
Yeah, no, the loss of May is huge.
The loss of May is huge. And I think that's like why my mother is so mad, is that like, if you hadn't tried to help these people, you'd still be alive. But what prevents May from just being fridged, and this is the conversation that we had, right? Is this the fridging of Aunt May? Something that you don't think would ever happen, right? Is the fact that Aunt May, it is her own agency and her own way of approaching the world, and understanding that I am taking on the risk of trying to help these people, but because that is the person that I am.
Yeah, well, and remember, part of the deal with fridging, this is a conversation we had a long time ago on the show, but part of the deal with fridging is that the character is so thin and useless otherwise. Like, they are literally just created to be a plot point, to be killed so that the person then has something to go on. And the truth of the matter is that's just not that's not true with this Aunt May. This character has been developed over more more than 3 movies. We have seen this character, and we have fallen in love with her, and she has proven to be an important part of Peter's upbringing before this. This is not the first thing that she taught Peter. This is not the only thing she left with Peter. She gave him so much more than just this moment. So this moment then becomes, in a sense, earned. You know, people can definitely disagree with that and be upset about it. I've heard a couple of people who felt like it was like, why did that have to be the thing that happened, right? And I totally, like, you know, like, I cannot disagree with some of those conversations. But for me, a huge part of that concept has to be that character that is lost more often than not is one that really otherwise was inconsequential. So literally, to the creator, they were just a prop, right? And that's not what happens.
That is not Aunt May at all, especially when you consider all of the characterization she has been given and represented in the last 2 films.
And it's not out of character for what happens, right? Like, it's not because she does something that Aunt May would never do that she suddenly finds herself in this dangerous situation. It's the opposite. She's doing everything that we expect her character to do, even after that moment.
Yeah. Which is exactly the argument that I made and made my mother understand. But it was like the fact that she's like, it's so stupid. She died for no reason. And it's like, I get where you would say that. I understand it. But what you need to understand is there have been a lot of characters who have died for no reason. She knew the risks, and she still did what in her soul she felt was the right thing to do.
I would be more inclined to call what happens to Nat in Endgame fridging before I would call this fridging. Agreed. You know what I mean?
I mean, and that whole scene has taken on nothing but different meaning in the wake of the Black Widow film. Mm-hmm. And everything that she went through. But yeah, that moment where, and I agree with you, her giving up her, I was so upset by it because it felt unearned. And it felt unearned because we didn't have the movie that explained why she did what she did. Right?
Yeah, I mean, like, you gotta understand, I came out of that movie feeling wholeheartedly that she knew what she was doing, why she was doing it, and I didn't like it, but I did not feel nearly as upset by it as other people did. So, like, that's where I'm coming from with it, where, like, but as I just pointed out, I can't ignore like the absurdity of everything about that character leading to, of all things, that is just like, is for sure something to be talked about. But yeah, that not what we see in Spider-Man. It earns every moment of itself, including this moment where we lose Aunt May. Yeah,
we've certainly talked about it before, but I mean, just after Endgame, I'm like, it really kind of felt like they were leading up to Hawkeye with like all of the characterization to be the one to give it up so that the world could be saved. So then when it's Nat, it felt so unearned. And that is really what fridging is about in a lot of ways, is just like, that just seemed to happen so that the story could move on and move forward. That was just a plot point.
We're not doing an Endgame. We're not doing an Endgame episode, so we're not going to get into this.
We're not going to go deeper into it, but you get to share your side of it.
I'm just saying that I disagree with everything that you're saying without having to then spend a half an hour justifying it.
We've had the conversation before. Go back in the archives. There's plenty of episodes for you to wet your whistle with of the Say Report. If you've enjoyed what we've talked about this episode. And honestly, you might not. There was a whole crazy thing in the beginning, but also spider related, right? Because we're crazy. We're crazy bastards.
So can we talk about some end credit stuff now?
I want to talk about one other thing before we go to end credits, and it's brief. What was Mysterio right about?
Give me context. What do you mean?
So there's a big thing in the wake of the reveal that, I mean, it's all lie. It's all propaganda. It's all how the media influences the court of public opinion. Like, that's another really intense message of this film is how the media influences the court of public opinion. So the way that it is painted is that Peter Parker used the Tony Stark drones to attack London and then executed Mysterio. And in the wake of that, a cry against Peter for his actions was Mysterio was right. And I don't know what
Well,
he was
remember,
right about.
remember in his final moments, he's doing that video about like Spider-Man's a monster and like don't trust him and like all of that stuff. So I
Okay,
just imagine that that's what they were referring
that's
to.
fine. I needed to parse through that, because it's not like one of those situations where it's also really kind of lazy, not to be a total asshole about it, but the other marketing that we see in the MCU TV shows, which sort of kept the fires burning before we got No Way Home and Shang-Chi and the Eternals, but really No Way Home, right? Black Widow was a weird coda and fit in before stuff that had already happened. And then Shang-Chi and Eternals.
Not even a coda. It felt like a novella that was released
Yeah.
after the fact that everybody was like, wish we read this before.
It was a bit
Anyway.
like Dead of Bones, to go back to the Sword of Truth. Yeah, it's just one of those situations where, like, Black Widow, even though it touched on and used a lot of these characters that we already knew, it did feel weirdly, it didn't feel as final as No Way Home. And then Shang-Chi and the Eternals introducing new characters, really showing us that there's a whole world here, right? Showing us that London and China exist in the MCU.
Well, not just London and China, which I think was, like Mesopotamia and all this stuff. Like,
right.
but yes, yeah.
But it opened the world up in a way that the other films really just kind of focused on what was going on in the United States of America.
Well, the funny thing is that for a movie like Spider-Man that talks about the multiverse as if we've never seen it before, Shang-Chi literally introduces the idea that there are parallel universes to ours, and that is the realm that they go to. So like there's a weird element of like, yeah, for you people it's new, like, right? Like
True. That's a good point. It's yeah. But what I'm talking about is, like, so the ones that kept the fires burning, right? The ones that were using characters like Wanda in WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier and Hawkeye and What If and all these other characters that were reused and kept the fires burning. A theme in those came to decry that Thanos was right about it halving the population, fixing all of our problems. So then when I come to No Way Home, all of these cries of like Mysterio was right just kind of feels like lazy propaganda.
I thought that was the joke.
Okay, and that's
Is that
okay.
not the joke?
I guess that's
that
the
was
joke.
Like this movie has a sense of humor about itself and
yeah.
about the history of the MCU. So I thought that it was just like that was the bit, is like it was the Thanos is right of this particular movie was Mysterio is right. So I think you're just calling out the joke.
So yeah, I guess I'm calling out the joke. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't something grander there, right? Mysterio, his only message is that Spider-Man is the bad guy, right? Which then someone like Alex Jones, Jonah Jameson, is totally going to leap onto and use as his big talking point.
Yeah, no, I mean he positions himself, Mysterio positions himself as a martyr, and like ends up with a cult of people that follow him, despite the fact that there's very little evidence that he even straight up existed in this world. But like it's crazy. Like, and what's even crazier is the ways in which that movie talks about multiverses itself before you get to this one, right? Like,
oh yeah, his whole thing is that he is a multiversal hero. Right. Like, it's a made-up story. The multiverse is the big reveal at that bar, that wonderful scene that is just such friggin' lampshade hanging, navel-gazing to earlier MCU stuff.
Yeah.
And he talks about, only you could make up something as absurd as a superhero from another universe.
Yep.
And then literally that's the plot point of the next Spider-Man movie. Yeah, it's so I just wanted to make sure that I wanted to address that thing, because to me it just felt like kind of lazy. But if that's the joke, if that's the whole point of it, is that like Mysterio was also right. If it were also, if the marketing was, if the graffiti was Mysterio was also right, I think it would have hit for me like easier than just Mysterio was right, because he didn't have some grand message from the stars the way that Thanos did.
No, but I think the message they're referring to is that Spider-Man is actually the villain. Is just it.
It's just
it. And with the way that this movie plays with the idea that all Spider-Mans before kind of dealt with their baddies in not the best way, like this movie kind of does lean into that idea that up until this movie, Spider-Man has kind of been like shitty to his villains, and like this movie is correcting all of that. It actually plays with a really interesting idea of like Spider-Man was the true villain all along, and then like this movie kind of goes out of its way to be like he kind of was though, and I don't hate it.
Yeah, and also you got to think of, if you're Tom Holland's Peter Parker Spider-Man and you're being called a villain all this time, being given that opportunity to prove that, like, no, I'm not the villain, right? I'm going to legitimately try to help these people who really are just sort of having bad days. Two of these guys just fell into pits that happened to mutate their bodies.
Yeah.
Two of these guys in the pursuit of knowledge and science. I don't know. I really don't have any sympathies for Norman Osborn, because his whole character was searching for power. Like, well, he was in a pursuit of power that whole time.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely the element that he is convinced that he's going to be able to save lives and blah blah blah, and then it's the serum that really kind of cracks his brain. But he's mentally ill, like, and that, to put something on, to put a really heavy concept onto a character.
That's fine,
but like that idea being like, that's where the sympathy is supposedly supposed to come in, is that he's clearly sick in some way, right? Like there's that whole element to it.
But not actually sick the way that he is in Amazing Spider-Man 2,
right,
where his mental illness has to also be given a physical representation to make sure that you get it. And also, I mean, it's been a while since I've watched Spider-Man. It's one of the reasons why I suggested it as a very special episode. Isn't he also voted out of leadership, and that's why he, like, takes the serum and steals all the military stuff that the Goblin uses?
That happens after he's been subjected to the gas in the beginning.
Yeah.
So, like, the idea being that, like, maybe he wouldn't have done that if he didn't already poison himself. I don't know. It's a very, 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 like, thin, like, layer of like, hey, he's not always a bad guy. Like, no, he is, like, straight up. And not having sympathy for him is totally fair. It's just that we are supposed to be given some sympathy to this character, because even this movie leans into the idea that he is a sick individual, right? Yeah. And in the Raimi movies, we see that then passed down to Harry, and we feel a lot more sympathy for Harry than we ever did for Norman, because of the idea that it is not his sickness, it is his father's that's been passed down to him. But that's a lot of, like, really heady, like, reading of stuff that you may not necessarily read that way.
I mean, I agree with that, and especially to the fact that I think the fourth Goblin is Harry's therapist, and then the third Green Goblin is just a guy who happens to find a goblin hidey hole.
Yeah.
Like, but I really enjoyed the fact that the idea of that mental sickness that Norman passes down to Harry, and then Harry, in so telling it to his therapist, sort of infected him with that same way of thinking about what weakness is, and finding a way to actually feel powerful.
Yeah, at some point you get into the whole there's always been a Joker story, and I don't hate those stories, but that's when you start to get kind of in the realm of like too ethereal for me to really sink my teeth into, I guess is the way I'd put it.
Well, as Colin Trevorrow has proved, the original Joker was the Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Oh God! All right, we're clearly getting to the end of this episode, so maybe we should do some.
So let's talk about some credit scenes, because Sejohn. No, I'm excited.
Oops,
the credit scenes.
That's my universe calling me. Oh no, it's opening up. I'm leaving, Dev.
Oh, thanks, Sejohn. I'm gonna wake up in the future and then cry and die of heartache because our friendship has ended, with you going back to your universe and me waking up in 2062.
I'm gonna leave a little sticky puddle of something on the bar of the way as I go, though, somehow. Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Oh God. Yeah, so Venom shows up for 2 seconds.
Venom shows up for 2 seconds after. We're going to talk briefly about Venom Let There Be Carnage. And by briefly, I mean about the end credit scene in that movie, which is swinging so far out of its fucking leagues that it is disappointing, that it is... Oh my God. I love the Venom movie. The original Venom movie is super good, and Venom Let There Be Carnage really did a lot to rise to that same level of just everything that's going on in the world.
But
Well, it's not even but. I really enjoy it. It falls
There
just
is an
shy
end
of being
credit
perfect.
scene at the end of We're not going to get into a whole Venom versus Carnage nonsense,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
that's
that's
on
not what
episode
we're talking
itself. But there is an end credit scene in which, like, basically, not Tom Holland,
Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy looks at a TV screen and sees the portals opening up and then gets sucked into one himself, right? Like, am I misremembering that?
So that's what happens. But the more important thing about it is the reason why. And that is the fact that the Venom symbiote reveals that, like, he is part of the Clintar consciousness, that they are a hive mind,
Right.
and at any given moment he can tap into that hive mind and share in the collective knowledge of the Clintar. And so Tom Holland and Venom are like, let's do that. I think you'll enjoy it, right? We're on vacation. Why not fuck around with a hive mind? And it is because of the fact that apparently the Clintar exist across universes. They are not one universe, one Clintar. That hive mind is multi-universal. And this is all my interpretation of it, because Dale was very upset. She's like, well, how does he know who Spider-Man is? How does he know? We haven't seen Spider-Man. And I'm like, well, the beautiful thing is that it's written where they literally just interface with the Clintar hive mind. So that is where Venom and then Eddie got the knowledge that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, because the Venom from Spider-Man 3 knew it.
But there is also this whole entire after credits scene in which we see Eddie like having a hard time grasping the concept of Spider-Man.
Right, but he is not having a hard time grasping the concept of Spider-Man. He is having a difficult time grasping the historical events of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right.
And that makes sense, because we have not seen a symbiote in that universe up to that point. So if no symbiotes existed, there would be no symbiotes developing and collecting information for the Clintar hive mind. The only information that Eddie Brock accesses is that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And that is enough information that when the portals happen, Eddie Brock with Venom from the Sony Spider-Man Cinematic Universe is pulled into the MCU. And then he sees the Spider-Man on the screen and he licks it, all excited to go fight him. And the reason why he wants to fight him is strictly because of what Topher Grace did as Venom in Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so much heavy lifting expositionally in honestly 3 minutes of movie.
But then it amounts to nothing.
It amounts to absolutely nothing.
Because then we get to see him after the credits of this whole Spider-Man movie of Eddie sitting at a bar asking about the events of the MCU, and just as he's kind of putting stuff together and decides he's going to go talk to Peter Parker, portal opens back up and he gets sucked back to his universe. And I guess this answers a question for me that I kind of had been having, like, had not been sitting right with me. I couldn't figure out how a piece of the symbiote got left behind, because lo and behold, as he gets sucked to the portal, piece of the symbiote left behind crawls off like Michigan J. Frog style off the bar. Like, all I could think of was the fucking alien from Spaceballs. But this idea being that, like, something got left behind, and I was like, that can't be possible, right? Like, the idea being that everything got sent back to its own universe. But if we're to believe that the symbiotes can kind of work within multi-universes, which I'm totally on board with, considering some of the crazy shit that happens with the symbiotes in the Marvel comics, and possibly might happen in the MCU depending on what they do going forward. But the idea that the symbiotes can kind of exist between multiverses, I am okay with that. I didn't really consider the idea that there are probably symbiotes somewhere in this universe.
But I don't think there were symbiotes. I think this is the introduction of the symbiote to the MCU.
I think this is going to be the introduction of the symbiotes to Earth, and that this is going to lead to other symbiotes in the universe.
That would be wonderful. Black King, I would love the Black King.
I think that kind of stuff is probably more likely what we're going to see, especially if you consider some of the things that we are going to be seeing going forward with, like, Blade and Black Knight and stuff like that. Yeah. I think we're gonna learn that other symbiotes have existed in this universe, but I think this is gonna be the first symbiote that really has anything to do with Earth.
Yeah, Venom is probably, that bit of the Venom symbiote is what's going to draw them to Earth. That's interesting. Also, shout out to the bartender, who's Danny Rojas from Ted Lasso. I'm excited for the third and final season of Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
Football,
and then finally, last but not least.
Oh, no. There's one other thing that we have to address before that. And that is the fact that the idea of something being left behind is a major plot point for Sandman for an hour and a half of this movie. So they have, not in words, but showing, not telling, completely opened it up for a bit of the Venom symbiote to be left behind. By the fact that Sandman left a bit of himself behind in the Sam Raimi universe.
But do they say that? Because, like, I gotta be honest, that was not really clear to me in the 2 viewings I made of this movie.
It's all visual. Yeah. Like, it is, he's missing where his heart is, like, on his body, there is a chunk of him missing. Every time that you see Sandman visually, whenever he tries to look like Flint Marko, that part of him is missing. And, like, on one hand, it's fucking heavy-handed because I miss my daughter. Like, he talks about how much he wants his daughter to see his daughter again. So, like, it's a visual thing of, like, the part of him that's missing is his heart, which his daughter represents. But also, it's the reason why he doesn't become Thomas Hayden Church.
Yeah.
Is the fact that he doesn't have that part of his sand. It was left behind. It's and that's confirmed from, like, the screenwriter and the director have all said that's how we justified the fact that he doesn't ever become Flint Marko, because by all accounts he should have that ability, but the way that he becomes himself again is to have all of what represents him there.
Yeah, I mean, it also just stinks of not being able to afford Thomas Hayden Church for more than one day. So
yes,
end of that.
It doesn't change. Yeah, but also, I mean, it's also supported by stuff that happens in Spider-Man 3 because he eventually absorbs other parts of sand, and then after that, it is more difficult for him to take normal form.
Right.
Because so much of the particles that do have his, you know, consciousness associated with them are spread out through the other sand.
Right.
They decided their own way that the world worked with Sandman, and you know what? I'm kind of okay with it.
Yeah.
So yes, and then the other thing, this is what I fucking want from Marvel after credit scenes. I've said it before here. It's what I want going forward. I think it's the reason why we haven't seen a trailer for Thor: Love and Thunder yet. If I have to be honest, the fact that Thor: Love and Thunder is trending on Twitter every day, and the only reason it's trending is because people are like, where's the trailer?
I'd rather they not put a trailer I've already seen 10 times on the internet at the end of the movie if they're going to put anything, but okay.
Right. That's exactly what I'm saying. But that's the thing. I think that what they're trying out now is the first trailer reveal of these films is going to actually be a trailer to the movie.
Well, Thor would be the first time they do it if they do that way. Because, again, the Doctor Strange trailer they put at the end of this one was one that had been up online for a while already. So maybe
I don't know that. I didn't know that. I hadn't watched it. That trailer had released before Spider-Man released, because there was not a trailer for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness before Spider-Man when I saw it in theaters. And then that one played, and I'm just like, that was perfect. Because now I get to think about what I just saw in that movie and how it relates to the film that I just watched, as opposed to seeing it before the movie. So maybe it
came out in the December release with it, and that's all well and good, but they're a little late to the game because now people are not going to be going to the movies to see these movies.
Right, but I think that was their original plan, was we won't release the trailer until you get to see it as a trailer to this film.
Yeah.
So, like, for you had already seen that trailer, but that's because you didn't see the movie until it released digitally.
Right, and I'm saying going forward, there's going to be a lot more people like me that's going to be the way it goes. Right. It's just,
it was an experiment.
I think the problem is that they took something that was like a real joy because it was like a quirky thing that they were doing and just turned it into just marketing.
Yeah.
And it was always marketing, but they've now made it so blatantly marketing that it left a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah. I don't know. And it also, what it really felt like was when I first saw Amazing Spider-Man 2, the end credit scene was the stuff in Vietnam with Toad and Blob and all of them. Like, it showed that whole scene in Vietnam from Days of Future Past at the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2 as a trailer. And that was like interesting because they had never done that before. Plus, it was cross promotion with like a Fox property and a Sony property. Can you believe that was only 8 years ago?
Yeah.
Where like that was how different it was. So then seeing this, like, it also kind of felt like a callback to what Sony was trying to do with their movies back then, where we'll save a trailer for the next one afterwards. But my big hypothesis, and the reason why we haven't seen that Thor Love and Thunder trailer yet, is it is at the end of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And to not have people like you, or like, I've already seen this 20 times on YouTube, they're just not releasing a trailer until that movie comes out.
Mm.
And if it comes out beforehand, then I will gladly eat the crow sandwich that has been served to me. But as more and more people, as every day I see people demanding a trailer for Thor Love and Thunder, and then being reminded that we didn't see a trailer for Multiverse of Madness until the end of Spider-Man. At the end of the day,
I'm sure you're right, and that sucks because I'm not going to stick around to watch the credits anymore for Marvel movies. Is essentially what they're doing, is they're poisoning the well on what was a really good tactic to get people to sit and watch all the way to the end of the credits and get a little piece of something and still be a piece of marketing. They're officially making it. It's already hard enough when I go out with like a large group of people to these movies to get everybody to kind of hang out through the credits. That's already kind of a fight. Now the idea being like, well, it's probably just going to be a trailer for the next one. Even if it's not, at this point now, it's the idea that it's probably going to be, is now they're not going to get the same amount of people to stick around and watch that. And then what that also means is they're probably not putting that preview before the movie, where they're guaranteed to get the majority of eyeballs on it.
Yeah.
So like they're really, really screwing themselves if that's what they plan on doing going forward.
I don't. Here's the thing.
That's not clever marketing to me. Like, doing it once is clever because everybody was expecting something else, but doing it a second time is just going to be ruining it. So,
I think it was an experiment. I think that they decided to try it with these couple of films, right? And then the fact that Multiverse of Madness got delayed really just kind of fucked them.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they haven't pivoted, the fact that they're sticking by it, is a little bit strange. Pardon the pun. Sorry. It's strange that they're sticking with that, because it would have been better if, when that film were delayed, we're going to release this trailer for this film, and then we'll put something fun at the end of Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. But also, we need to consider the fact that we are still being affected by what COVID did to the entertainment industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's where I'm at. Dude, it is super strange to me. Again, I need to stop saying the word. It's super odd to me that the toys and the merchandise for Thor Love and Thunder is still street dated for April 26th. That's crazy to me. That because people have found items, right? I sent you a picture of the next Marvel Legends wave, which is all Love and Thunder stuff, and has like spoilers for characters in it, like how they're going to look and who's going to be in it. And those are showing up on store shelves, and when people go to buy them, they're street dated for April 26th. The fact that everything didn't shift with Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness is crazy to me. And that's just
I don't disagree. I don't know what the hell they're going to do to get that stuff back on track. At some point, they're going to have to kind of slow down on some of that marketing stuff. Otherwise, for the rest of eternity, they're going to be 8 months ahead of their movies now.
Right. And as we saw with something like the Cybertron trilogy on Netflix, you don't have the synergy between the two things. The toys come out so far before the media that is supposed to be selling the toys don't sell. And then because the toys don't sell, that's your justification for not doing that type of merchandise anymore.
Yeah,
when
and
really
the media suffers because sometimes some of the stuff you're releasing has major spoilery stuff, and it kind of ruins it for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that I had the entire Black Widow like set of figures 2 years before it was in theaters was crazy, Sejohn.
We talked about this when they did a Marvel release of Villainous,
Yeah.
the Disney board game. One of the major Marvel villains that they included in that was Taskmaster, and it was set to come out before the original release date of the movie. So Taskmaster as a Marvel villain, which they even were kind of hiding who the villain of that movie was for a long time. So like it was just a huge like, yep, well, looks like that's who the villain must be.
Yeah. It's I don't know. It's
and if
very
you bought the game, there were elements in the ways in which you play that game. Just for anybody that doesn't know, the way that you play that game, there's cards, and the cards contain a lot of stuff like heroes and events from the movies and things that you do in that movie in order to like reenact it and stuff like that. So there was a lot of that movie that was given away just by Taskmaster being in that game. Yeah, it was fucking wild.
It's crazy, and we're still seeing that. It's what I said when I went to go see Black Widow in the theater, and it opened with Marvel basically flopping their dick on the table and saying, "Here's the movies that are coming out for the next 3 years."
Yeah,
and I'm like, this was a mistake, and it's already been proven to have been a mistake multiple times.
Yep.
And maybe things are going to be back on track now, but who knows? And I think that's good, right? Does that cover everything that you wanted to discuss about No Way Home? There's so much more there, but now we're just turning into the normal show that like kind of just pisses on marketing and how marketing fucks up the entertainment industry.
Yeah, no, man. I mean, like, I think that the thing is like this is like such a hybrid piece of good media, like good Marvel entertainment, but also mixed in with the fact that like it is pretty blatant how much this movie kind of leans on you needing to go back and revisit everything in Marvel. So it is like one of the biggest pieces of marketing that they could have ever released. It's 2.5 hours of a commercial for everything else Marvel has ever done. And they did it. They succeeded. So congratulations, guys. Take my money.
What I'm going to say is it's also a really good movie.
Yeah.
Like it is well, like it could just be that easy cash grab marketing piece of shit that we have seen so many times come out from Hollywood, right? It could have been Son of Kong. Let's just be an asshole, right? Like let's look at the most blatantly exploitive piece of cinema that ever came out, which was Son of Kong, released 9 months after the original King Kong, specifically because there's more money to be made. Right. They didn't have a story. It is just people want more King Kong. Let's give him a son and give that son a movie. This is not Son of Kong. This is a well-written, well-realized, like, it's beautiful to look at. It's a deep story. They could have cheaped out on this, but they went to the nines on every single part of this film.
Yep.
And that is what I appreciate about it. Especially watching it that second time, like, it's got a good pace. It is... There's stuff going on in it that's hyper deep. Like, I still wonder, there's that moment right before where, you know, all hell breaks loose at Happy's condominium, and the lizard grabs Peter and says, "I told you there would be consequences," and throws him back into the building. And I am not certain if that is the lizard throwing him back to the arms of Norman Osborn to allow Norman to continue fighting him, or if it is the lizard trying to protect him from showing up on camera and becoming more of a villain in the eyes of that world.
Yeah.
Like, and because the first time I'm like, clearly it's just the lizard being the lizard, but then knowing that the lizard is an intelligent creature and him being like, here it goes as soon as the news trucks show up, it legitimately feels like, please do not go outside, Peter. It will only make things worse for all of us.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a good one. And even if you just heard us talk about it, we gave away the big spoiler. But other than, it's still a hell of a ride. It's a hell of a ride, this movie. And it's worth checking out, even if you've seen no Spider-Man or you've seen them all. I would say check it out.
Nothing in between.
Yeah. All right. So if you would like to speak to Sejohn about your personal experiences with Somewhere in Time, he is available on Twitter at Siege versus the World.
And if you want to hit up Devon for just more insane conversations about, like, you know, who would you fucking time, you can get him at Devon D. Decker.
I am willing to have these conversations with you. I am willing to normalize all of the fucked up conversations that society tells us we should not have being something that we give like 15 good minutes to talk about. Bring them my way. All right, so without that, folks, remember, with great power comes great responsibility. And one of those responsibilities right now is for Will to bring us home. Have a good one, folks.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host, Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.